morning, Commissioner Parker.
Morning.
We are going to have a recess. Go watch the soul. Until fortunately there was some.
Good morning and welcome to the August 21st, 2017 Monday regularly scheduled meeting. Committee meeting of your Board of County Commissioners. We're glad you're all here today. A special day today. I hear that we're going to have a significant event, something that comes around about every 99 years or so. So I've been assured by everyone involved in today's meeting that we are going to keep the comments brief and we are going to keep things moving along in a fast manner. I can see that Commissioner Cole is ready for today's event. Glad that you came prepared. Welcome back, by the way. Glad to see we're back at full strength, Commissioner Salter and Commissioner Cole. If you do have a cell phone, please put it on silent mode, if you would, please. And if you're going to be speaking today, if you would, get a speaker's form filled out and just give your name and address for the record when you come up. First thing we'll do is approve the agenda, and I will start with my right with Commissioner Parker.
Approved.
Mr. Cole?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple things. I wondered if anybody happened to catch the Triumph Gulf Coast meeting, and I didn't go, but I did see it on the Florida Network, and I was wondering if we could maybe recap a couple of those items. I don't know if anybody else watched it, but I made some notes when I watched it yesterday.
Sure. We could either recap that today, or we could recap that at Thursday's meeting.
Let's do it Thursday. Give everybody a chance to maybe, take a look at it if they want to. It is on the Florida Network, and some interesting goals were set, let's say, from the committee, and I think it'd be prudent for us to stay aware of that. The other item, too, is just I want to make everybody aware that it was not the county that sprayed along the Red Brick Road and killed all the trees. I kind of got conflicting reports, but I hope the current report is correct. If you go along there, you see everything's dead looking, real nasty looking along that beautiful trail that we have. And that was done by the Office of Greenways and Trails. So maybe they ought to change their name to the Office of Brownways and Trails, but I'm going to assure everybody that I'm going to try to find out who's doing it and have it stopped. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cole. And yes, Tony, if we could add a Triumph update to information only that goes nicely with our other information only items for Thursday. Commissioner Salter.
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner Lynchard.
No changes, Mr. Chairman.
Staff.
The only change, and I think you'll probably handle it if you, we do have that one item on engineering, Mr. Chairman, that I believe the folks from United Bank are here to speak about that item number 5 on engineering, if you wanted to bump it up a little bit.
Yes, I was going to take number 5 in engineering on the schedule and move that behind number 11 on admin. Move that up to number 11, just behind number 11 on admin. Okay. Now move approval of today's agenda with those modifications. Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved. You can see before you we have 2 information-only items for Thursday. We'll have a legislative recap. We'll also have members of Holly by the Sea here as well, for information-only item, and then we've also added the Triumph update. And we'll now move on to Economic Development Committee, RFQ proposal recommendation. And we have Shannon here from our Economic Development team to let us know about this first ever Economic Development Strategic Plan initiative.
Correct. This is the first time that the county has gone out for a economic development strategic plan. The previous organization had a internal strategic plan that was done back in '01. So 16 years later, I think it's time for us to have a plan for ourselves. And the firm that we selected is Gardner Economics, who had a partnership with DCI, a well-known economic development marketing firm out of New York. And I believe that these two firms together can put together a strong proposal for Santa Rosa County on basically a pathway or action plan of where we want to go from here. Jay is a well-known site selector and also a founding member of the Site Selectors Guild, which is a forum of all site selectors where they get together and give the best practice knowledge to economic developers and how we should best proceed. So with that, I'll give you Jay Gardner of Gardner Economics and DCI as my recommendation.
Thank you. And I'm hoping that we can, while we still enjoy the economic benefit that our military provides, that we can figure out a way that we can add a third leg to the stool, if you will. We have, or maybe a fourth leg would be a better way of saying it. We have military, we have tourism, we have agriculture. What's the next thing that we should be going after to best position ourselves and diversify our economic development initiatives? So I'm in support of this. I know a lot of times folks will speak up and say, why are we spending, making this type of investment on a plan? That's what our folks internally should be doing. And I think you've been executing on a plan and executing quite well, and we've been getting results. But you know, for us to know what the future is going to be and for us to direct our efforts and our resources the appropriate way, it would be good for us to have a strategic plan to set that forward. Open it up if any other members of the board would like to comment. If not, then I'm prepared to move the item to Thursday. Move this item to Thursday without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. Now move on to the Administrative Committee. Item number 1 is 2017 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant, a local solicitation. This is brought forward by our Sheriff's Department and had the information there in your backup. Definitely a reasonable request and something that will help them with their interest in keeping the community safe. Would move this to Thursday's agenda without objection.
Consent, Mr. Chairman. Consent agenda.
Would move this to Thursday's consent agenda, as well as the economic development item previously to the consent agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, an item is moved. Item number 2 is the Optimus Park Agreement. We have a letter from the City of Milton asking to terminate their maintenance of the Optimus Park. And that's certainly, they are fulfilling their obligation, their notification requirements. And I would move this to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, that item is moved. Item number 3, City of Milton request, placement of turtle statue. And for this item, because I did receive an email about this, I see that we have Julie here. We had the woman that was responsible, the artist, for creating the turtle originally, I believe the one that we have displayed in the Tourist Information Center office. This would be a new one, right, Julie, if you wouldn't mind? I know we were looking to make some modifications to the existing one, but this would be a new one, correct?
Alicia Hansen painted 2 turtles for us. The one that was previously had been for almost 2 years at the I-10 Welcome Center. That one has been relocated and is now at the Dragonfly Gallery. The area, she hand-painted the entire statue, and she used a stencil to put our logo on the top in a bare area that was just painted blue. And so it was relocated up there for the new logo to be re-stenciled. The one in Navarre, though, the other turtle that she painted, the logo is mixed in so much with the artwork that it would be hard to repaint a logo right there, even go over it without messing up her artwork. So we've left that one alone because I don't really know a way around going with that one. But the one that came from I-10 Welcome Center, I think that Miss Carey might have been confused about which one was where, but it's at the Dragonfly Gallery. And so I asked her to call me. I emailed her this morning and asked her to call me so that I could, maybe she wants to meet me at the Dragonfly Gallery and so that she can see It wouldn't be changing Alicia's artwork in any way, shape, or form. That would not be our intentions at all.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure that we were sensitive to that, and I appreciate
Absolutely.
you reaching out. So given that, I would move approval of this item to Thursday's agenda. Vice Chairman Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need some clarification on this. So we're not buying more turtles?
No, this is, yes.
Yes, no?
Yeah, we did. We bought another turtle,
Okay, so we got 2 turtles now.
and now there's a third turtle.
Okay, this third turtle is the one that's going to have the military theme,
Correct, that's the third turtle.
and they want to put it down on the corner of the courthouse. Okay,
Would have to be turning this over to them for liability once it's painted, for the city of Milton to have liability on it.
why, several questions. Why did the one get removed from the rest stop out at I-10? I kind of like that idea because it, lets people know they're coming in, possibly stop at Santa Rosa County, so.
We can't permanently leave our stuff there. We're on a contract on a yearly basis. And before that, Clearwater had their dolphin there for 2 years. And so they want to rotate. Actually, they like to do it annually. But we were able to get in a second round with our turtle over there.
Okay.
So it would be nice if we could keep it there for many years, but they won't let us.
All right, and that's the one that's at Dragonfly.
Correct, and it's only there to have the logo just taken off and redone, re-stenciled on the new logo.
Okay. And then we have one down at the Chamber of Commerce, or the,
At the Tourist Development Office in Navarre, there is one, yes.
I agree with what we have so far, and somewhat agree, since it's already been purchased, with the military theme. However, we have an extensive military memorial park down there, and I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to start looking like a copycat of Pensacola, and every corner you turn around on, you got a turtle stuck up somewhere.
No,
For
that
one
would-
thing, like I say, I don't want to be a copycat, so hopefully this is the last turtle, and we won't hear no more about it, because I'm not for buying a bunch more of these things and sticking them up everywhere. And the other thing is, if we're going to go north of Yellow River, it ought to be a snapping turtle or a gopher rather than a sea turtle, so.
That was discussed. We gave them the options of picking out the turtle, of being a snapping turtle, a river turtle, but they wanted to go with a sea turtle. We suggested they utilize a river turtle, but this was their final decision on what they wanted in the city. And as far as the turtles popping up on every corner, that's not the intention at all. Really, the intention was that they would be at the attractions, for instance, the Gulf Breeze Zoo, or maybe the pier, different type of tourism attractions throughout the county is what the TDC Board of Directors voted on. Not to have them at, not like Pensacola where they're just on every street corner, no.
How much do these things cost?
I'll have to look. Honestly, I can't remember right now, right off the top of my head, but I can find out today and get it to you.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with, spending money unnecessarily, and to a degree, this has been okay up till now, but I want to pull back a little bit on it, so, thank you.
I'll let the TDC Board of Directors know how you feel about that.
Okay. Would move this to Thursday's agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. Item number 4, Tony?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I assume that last one was consent, is that correct?
Yes, I
Okay.
apologize. I'll
That's
get in
fine.
the swing of things here.
That's right. What you have are really 2 annual items that we do for the Career Source Board. Is there someone here from Career Source, I believe? If there may not be any questions, so I'm right here. There may not be any questions, hang on. But if you have any questions, they'd be glad to answer them for you. As you know, I think Cliff has retired, but these items are somewhat ministerial in nature.
Okay, open it up for board discussion. You have the request before you related to Career Source Escarosa, that I think it went 50% to 30%. If there's no questions or comments from the board, given the ever declining amount of funds that are being allocated from the state on this? Seems like a reasonable request. I would move this to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. Item number 5 is the State Road 87, Highway 87 Navarre Landscape Project presentation, and we have, is Alicia here from, hey, good morning. We have a presentation about this project. It's over $500,000 beautification project. They've done a great job here, and we've had several meetings with Julie and Sheila and Glenn Bailey with Public Works and myself, and we feel like we've got a pretty good presentation here, especially for area in South County that might be a little bit unique. As many of you know, we had the Bay Bridge project, and as a result of the Bay Bridge project, the new bridge going in Pensacola, landscaping beautification funds for each district for DOT are based largely on the amount of money that's spent in each district. And because of the huge size of the, or amount of the bridge project, that meant that there was going to be extra dollars in District 3 for landscaping, and Sheila and her team went after some of those extra dollars, and we ended up getting them, and that's why we have a more than $500,000 beautification project for Highway 87, which will really provide a nice look as our first time and returning visitors enter Santa Rosa County. Alicia, thank you so much for being here today, and please take it away.
Oh, there we go. All right. Should put my presentation up there. Oh, okay. I'm the landscape designer that's been tasked with this project, and I'm really excited about it. I have been excited about it from the beginning and the potential of this project becoming something great. So I'm looking forward to hearing you guys' feedback today so that hopefully we can make a very successful landscape project that'll also be here for many years to come. So without further ado, we'll get started. And some of you know, but some of you don't know, that the original Phase 1, we have Phase 1 and Phase 2, but the original Phase 1 portion of this project extended from Highway 98 north up 87 to East Bay Boulevard. And then in some of the discussions that we had preliminarily, our kickoff meeting, et cetera, we decided that it might be best to concentrate the scope to a little bit less roadway so that we could make more of an impact. And so with that discussion, we also ran that by DOT to make sure that that would be okay for us to condense the scope. And they assured us that that would be fine, and there wouldn't be any necessary paperwork or anything like that to have to go through. So we did that. So we've reduced now Phase 1 from Highway 98 to Laredo Street, which is now a condense of what was 2.14 miles to now about just over a half a mile. So we did the same thing subsequently with Phase 2. It was originally thought that we should go all the way to Bob Tolbert Road, but now after that condensing, again, we shortened it from East Bay Boulevard, which now goes from 2.75 miles in road length to 3/4 of a mile. And as many of you probably know, and I wish this had a pointer, but there's a stretch of roadway through there that is owned by the military, so it's pretty vacant through there. There's not really a lot going on. So anyway, we really wanted to try to condense it down, so we did that. So now we go from East Bay Boulevard to East River Boat Ramp. We'll talk about the budget in the beginning, but then you can ask questions later if you have it. One of the things that I wanted to point out is the maintenance of traffic. I know that the project, I'll go forward to the schedule real fast, to show that we anticipate the project being completed sometime between March and September. So obviously that could be spring break through peak summertime. So I just wanted to point out that as part of our scope of services, we will include a traffic analysis that will figure out when the traffic is high and when it's at a peak time, and we will strategize plans that will make it so that lane closures and things like that are reduced to a minimum during those times, if not completely eliminated. Those traffic plans will also be given to your road department and maintenance department for them to review and give us some feedback, and if they would like to condense that down to a certain period of time and revise it, that will be done as well. So anyway, the budget for the phase 1 was 250, phase 2 was 275. These are rough budgetary sort of numbers at this time because we're just in the conceptual preliminary phase. So, but there is an irrigation number in here. My hopes, Commissioner Williamson was kind enough to reach out to the Holly Navarre Water Systems to see if we couldn't use some reuse water. We've been in contact with Mr. Bailey, and so our hopes are that in lieu of doing a well for at least maybe the south phase 1 end, that we would be able to use some reuse water versus doing a well. So we are going to pursue that after this conceptual approval, if you will, from you guys. We'll take that a little further and go forward with that. We had some goals, you know, we wanted to beautify things, make things look more attractive. We wanted to unify the corridor from I-10 southward. I think maybe there might be an effort going to happen from DOT that's going to enhance the interstate interchange at I-10 and 87. It was originally thought, I think, maybe that we might take that on as Santa Rosa County, being we. But it has apparently become apparent that the DOT has that in their next 5-year goals. So it's not going to be something that Santa Rosa County has to take on responsibility for doing. It'll be something that DOT will do. So we're hopefully they're going to unify with us as well for what we're doing. But attract people to the area, emphasize a gateway. You'll see in the background of this picture is kind of that gateway area to the ramp to the South Beach. So we wanted to emphasize some particular areas as entryways and gateways and make it cost effective, of course, and maintenance standpoint. So we talked about the schedule. You guys will see a 60% submission, 100% submission, and then there'll be a final submission, which is pretty typical things. So you'll get a chance to look at things again. There's 2 slides to this, but this is the plant palette. Consists of about 12 plant material. Some of these things you guys are probably familiar with. The purple pixie loropetalum is out in the medians out here along Highway 90. Breezegrass is it's kind of a new plant, but not really. It's been around a while. It was established actually in a nursery here in the Panhandle. It's very drought tolerant, et cetera, et cetera. It's a wonderful plant that's similar to your mealy grass, but doesn't bloom, and it doesn't get as tall. Perennial peanut. This is kind of actually one of the highlights of this project for me because I spoke to Mr. Bailey. He expressed maintenance, that like we don't have a lot of maintenance staff, so we need to minimize mowing and such and such and such. So perennial peanut on this project, for the majority of the project, will take the place of turf grass. This plant is a very low ground cover. There's multiple pictures throughout the slide, but you'll see. But I just wanted to say that this is drought tolerant, no need for fertilizer. It chokes out the weeds because it establishes the mat that chokes out weeds and stuff. So it's going to be very low maintenance, no mowing necessary. If you wanted to mow it, you could. If you don't, then that's fine. So anyway, of course, I could go on and on for days talking about plants because that's what I do, but I won't. Pendo palm, it's different than your cabbage palm. It is native to this area. It's not as tall. It's a slower grower. And it, I believe, will provide us something a little different than our sharpened pencils that we see that come from cabbage palm. So I'm hoping that, and Muskogee crepe myrtle, I just show you here the example of the color. Everybody knows what a crepe myrtle is. On this project, I proposed for them to be all clear trunk, which would be just not multi-trunk, but just have one main standard trunk and be clear to provide that clear line of sight that's required between the 30 inches and 6 foot. So most of these plants are low maintenance, easy to maintain, take care of, drought tolerant. Knockout rose may wind up being something like your drift rose, which you have out here in the medians as well, low powder color pink blooms. Emphasis on color. I was trying to give something that would give you some color and pop, as well as be low maintenance and intermingle some native plant material. So that's what we have there. We'll show you a little bit of the actual plans now, which, by the way, Sheila has a couple copies of this, but this is a full copy of the set of conceptual plans that just has just the plans instead of the presentation in it. But anyway, there's some existing plant material in the knockout rows that's in this bed here, and we just start at 98 and go forward. Anywhere you see gray, I think, is this Pointer? Yay. This is concrete, so there's no way to do anything there, in there. But this is right in front of CVS, right here, and the bank is right here, right down here. And so this is just starting things off. We have to kind of inch into it because of the existing landscape and the concrete. But here's where we really make that gateway possible. We had also had some discussion about exiting the Navarre Beach area, and how could we integrate that possibly, as well as saying hello to those visitors that are coming south to the beach. And so in this conceptual design, I have proposed some locations possibly for some of these features. Know that the sign design is not being designed by my firm, but we're going to be partnering with your marketing firm. Can't remember their name, but Paradise, that's right. Partnering with them. In fact, they're the ones that provided this sign photograph here, so that we could just give you an example of something that would occur there. Again, we're trying to make a gateway here and tying these areas together. It was asked before, do we intend to remove vegetation or anything like that to make this sort of thing happen? The only vegetation that would be removed, as proposed so far, would be simply in the median itself, the turf grass that's in the median now, or weeds that's there now. So this is just an example. Thank you for visiting Navarre Beach, but it doesn't have to be there. We show a different location in just a second. But the Pinto Palms, the effort here with them, we obviously can't put them in the median, so they're going to be in those extremity areas where there's no line of sight issues. So we're trying to give you some pop. This area is just pine trees, hardwoods, and so we need to give a good backdrop of something that's transitional and contrasts. So we're hoping that the Pintos will do that and provide that emphasis, and of course the crepe myrtles leading up to that. So I think it's been said that there was a concern about palm trees and did they really fit in Santa Rosa County, and so I think that for this area we find that we're kind of transitioning into that more coastal region, and so I felt like this area definitely could use some integration of some palm trees along the approach. Do I agree with palm trees like in the Highway 90 corridor? Not so much. We have those in Marietta as well. It's like, they don't really go here. So, but I really think that this area really could benefit from some of those and have some immediate impact. So there's actually about 20-something palm trees through here. So I'm hoping that will definitely, here's another possible sign location that could be, oriented towards travelers going north. So this little sign location could be another one of those. Thank you for visiting. So some feedback on the possible sign locations would be beneficial to both the marketing team, Paradise, as well as us. Our firm will cooperate with Paradise, and then when a sign design is determined, then our firm would take it from there and permit the sign with with DOT, sorry. And there are a little bit of criteria that is quite constringent with DOT. So we're very familiar with those types of things, special wording, you can't say a lot of things, yada, yada, yada. So we will take it from the design idea and permit it through DOT. So does anyone have any feedback about the signage locations or thoughts?
Any questions at this point? Vice Chairman Cole?
Thank you. The question I have is on your costs for the watering of the trees. Now, would you plan to jack and bore under the road? I mean, there's no plumbing there now, so how?
Well, that's definitely a concern, and that's why we're trying to determine if we're going to use reuse water, where it's coming, where the water supply is going to come from, how many borings are we going to have to do to tie the medians together. So that irrigation variable is a pretty big variable at this moment. That's why you see it's kind of got a pretty big price tag in there right now.
I would think if you start jacking boring, that price tag is gonna go up, though. I mean,
Well-
that's something we need to look at real hard.
No, it's a valid consideration, and that's why they brought that forward, and they put a significant number on the irrigation total for it, much like we did in Highway 98. That took up a lot of the money for that project, and it made us not be able to maybe do quite as much. We're optimistic that, in talking with Holly Navarre Water, that they were preparing to add reuse capabilities in that area to where they may be able to help us reduce that number significantly. But if not, then you see what you have there, which is it takes up a considerable chunk of the money to be able to provide for that.
And then my only other question would be long-term maintenance of it. After the state money's gone and we've built all this, what's the plans for funding on long-term maintenance?
Yeah, and I think this area here, I don't know, have we had a findings of fact yet on this southern section of Highway 87? I guess we haven't yet, but it would be my understanding that the areas there south 87, certainly from, the East River area, that southward, or Bob Tolbert Road area southward, that those would be designated as a tourism corridor, and that we would include that in our maintenance costs of what we have already, to where there would be no general fund impact. So that isn't a decision that this board has made yet, certainly, but certainly a consideration.
Mr. Chairman, we can check our records to verify what we may have. I mean, it's certainly logical to extend the corridor up that far, and we'll check to make sure that we haven't already, maybe possibly in some of this action, done that.
Okay. I thought maybe there was an outside chance that we had, but maybe not. I'm not.
I think maybe we have.
Okay. All right. But good questions, Vice Chairman Cole. Bring it on in.
No further input on the sign location or anything. We
Well,
think.
we know that before anything would be placed, it's going to be coming back to the board for consideration
Sure.
and approval anyway, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. All right, well, we'll go forward then. You guys probably have copies of the presentation in front of you, so you can, and you may have already reviewed this, but this is just going to be the approach down southward. This is, again, crepe myrtles, roses, the perennial peanut taking place of the turf grass. There you have a close-up view of the perennial peanut bloom, which is about the size of your thumbnail. And so it might seem like it's not very impactful, but when you see a big yellow blanket of them, it is quite impactful. The city of Tallahassee has successfully done this project. And this picture right here, which you can't see very well from here, but this picture right here is actually a median in Tallahassee at Appleyard Drive and Tennessee Street. And that's a project where they have successfully done that. And so that was actually where my inspiration came from. I talked to the landscape architect in the city of Tallahassee and got a lot of feedback from her and some positive input from them. So this is the start of phase 2. Will be East Bay Road going north. This median here is very skinny, very narrow, so we're keeping it to simple perennial peanut for there. Again, a duplication of the string of palms. This is, I think, 16 or 15 of them here. You didn't get a whole lot more low maintenance than those 4 plants right there. So my goal was, I was thinking of Mr. Bailey the whole time, of his strong encouragement for that. So this is that plant palette pretty well repeated. This is the long stretch between most of you know where the Coastline Calvary Chapel is. And this is a very, very long median. So we broke this up with the Lord Pedlum and breezegrass, and then we have a long stretch of the pink muley grass that breaks it up for a good ways and goes for a good stretch. This is the other public boat launch that's just before the East River. This is going to be simplistic. I think we may exchange the wax myrtle for something else. And here we can actually have the height of the knockout rose because there's a guardrail right through here. So we can actually have that height there. And this again is muhly grass and perennial peanut. This is an area of interest that I would appreciate some feedback if anyone has any, whether it be positive or negative. This could be a possible sign location again to say, thanks for visiting, come back to see us, whatever slogan that Paradise might come up with. You see right down here that this is the existing condition, which is 2 water oak trees that have been just randomly left behind for whatever reason. And there's quite a bit of underbrush and such in front of them. But my hope is that we can kind of enhance them and kind of make this a little highlight area as well. Because what we do across the street is use some DOT right-of-way area that we were not really aware of in the beginning. Commissioner Williamson was thinking, where are we going to put that sign? How are we going to do that? And I think that we've come up with a great plan to, if you see this dashed line right down through here, this is all DOT right-of-way. So all the way to this stormwater pond that sits right here. So I propose that we make a nice display there, raised berm-ish planting bed, and include our welcome to Navarre. I use the Navarre Beach sign there, but it could be something similar to that Paradise might do, that would give us that entry sign and really make that impact as well. So that goes back to why I was trying to do something kind of that gateway sort of feeling across the way from the East River Boat Ramp. But
And as a reminder to my fellow commissioners, that's where currently we have a smaller sign that's basically up on the hill next to the guardrail.
Right there.
And if this would be a dramatic improvement over our current sign placement and look as you go around that turn there, entering what most believe to be the end of the Holly community and the beginning of the Navarre community.
Yeah, so there's a guardrail here, so that's another issue. It's a very sloped area as well. So I think that this location provides us much more opportunity to enhance, and if budget allows, this whole could be perennial peanut, but I don't think that's going to happen right now. So without further ado, that's the end of things. I'm certainly open to questions, input, plant palette changes, anything like that. Any suggestions on?
Well, I think it's a great plan. I want to say thank you for bringing it forward in the way you describe everything. It looks like the color and the amount of plant material kind of ramp up as we get closer to Highway 98, letting folks know that they're entering an area of significance for sure. I love the idea that as you're leaving on 87 heading north, that there's an area that's currently unsightly that we would make much improved to say, hey, thanks for visiting with us. And then as you're coming into the Navarre area, we'd have another opportunity to say welcome. I think it's a great plan. I love your comments about the fact that made the palm trees while I was initially resistant to that. And I think we've heard comments from the board that fellow board members may be resistant to that. I think it does work down in South County, especially when we're talking about most folks are heading down 87 to go to the beach. So I think it's a great plan, and I'm absolutely in favor of it, as you know. I'll turn it over to the board now if anybody would like to make comments or has any questions for Alicia on this. Vice Chairman Cole.
Thank you. I like the plan, like the idea. You spoke briefly about the north end of Highway 87. Could you touch on that a little bit more? DOT's planning something similar to this on their dime?
Yes,
Of course,
sir.
this is their dime, but I mean, not through us. So.
It's unrelated to this project, I believe, but
Yes, so about 4 weeks ago, FDOT asked us if we had any future landscape projects that we would like for them to consider in their programming, I believe, of the 18-19 fiscal year. We did pass along your suggestion from a few months back to look at that Highway 87 interchange, and they did come back to us and they said that they support that, but they are actually going to program it into their work plan, which is a win for us. So what we've asked them to do is just to, when they design it, to keep it low maintenance. That way we don't have to take on any maintenance costs related to that. So they'll do like a simple, non-irrigated landscaping there, but the county will have no responsibility related to the design, construction, or future maintenance of it. It will all be FDOT handled.
Okay, thank you. Tricia, keep me abreast of that, please.
Will do. I'll send an email, but I do want to just ask the board, if you'll recall when we wrote the contract with Alicia's firm, we had an option for signage permitting, and so I think it would be really helpful today for you to advise if they should move forward with going ahead and selecting appropriate signage locations, working with Julie and the Tourism Development Office, and then authorizing them to permit those signs because it was an option in the contract.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that I would be in support of. We have with the presentation today the recommended sign locations. One of them, we already have an existing sign location. It's just, as I said, up on the side of the hill next to the guardrail, not really the optimum location. What you're providing here would be much enhanced. So really, we're talking about, I think, 3 new sign locations. One would be over there on the east side of Highway 87 as you're heading north there at River Road, where you talked about the 2 water oaks, basically saying, thanks for visiting. And then the other 2 locations would be almost down to Highway 98 in the DOT right-of-way, and those pretty much the same thing. Thanks for coming, and then welcome to Navarre Beach. And then, I guess, approving those locations, I'm fine with approving those locations as long as Julie and Paradise and you are going to come back to the board for final approval of what they'll look like.
Sure, I know that's definitely what's going to happen. I think that'll be something that Julie or Paradise will bring back. We'll bring back before you guys to approve the actual sign design. It'll just be actually figuring out now if where I have proposed them is where you guys would like to see them, and then it'll be refinement of what will we see there in those locations. So if you have my presentation back up there, do we want to use the thank you for visiting on the ramp, or do we want to use it, you think, in the median?
Well, I think those decisions can probably be made with Julie's help
Okay,
and the staff
that's fine.
coordinating and with Paradise. I think as far as the locations go and approving that we would have signage in those locations, that's something that I'm definitely in support of.
Okay.
So we'll let staff develop
Okay.
that and come back to us with what it'll say precisely.
Okay, well, is that it? If that's,
And do we have a comment from the public? Mr. Helms, good morning.
Yes, Jeff Helms, 1193 Mary Lou Lane, Gulf Breeze. To add to what Alicia's saying, Commissioner Cole, you made a point about the jack and board and the directional drill and the cost. The original plans were supposed to have anticipated future landscaping. And so there's supposed to be PVC or some conduit going into the medians. So the recommendation, I'd encourage you, if you need help, get the as-built plans and see if they were constructed, because the original plans had them. If they cut them out at some point, maybe at 100% or what have you, but we can help them get those plans. I'd hate for you to not see the access point. A lot of times they're buried and they're covered, and you put metal tape on them so that you can get the metal detectors to find them. And I think, as landscaping, you've probably seen those. But the intent was to have it in the original plans. I know it was built several years ago, but it would have been PVC. So just let me know. We can get our folks in Chipley to help you do that. There's no need to try to...
Thank you very much for
Mr.
that.
Chairman, before Jeff
Yes.
leaves, Jeff, are you aware of anything like that at the north end also? Because
There may have been. I wasn't as involved on the north end as I was the south end. But that's not uncommon if you're anticipating landscaping in an area.
well, not
of a
just
community.
landscaping, but City of Milton has sewage and water out
Right.
there on east side of 87, and I often question why they wouldn't put chases like that under the highway.
It's
provide
easy. The old plans are all on CAD. It's so easy to get these plans now. We'd be glad to help you. I've got folks in Chipley with our general consultant contract can help you get it, and the folks at Maintenance Milton Operations, right down the road here, can get the as-built and show what was built, and that will
Thank you.
help you.
Thank you.
Make your life a lot easier.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Good stuff. Okay, So if there's no further questions or comments from the board, then I would move this to Thursday's consent agenda, including the language about the signs. That would be included as part of the motion for approval on Thursday, and I would move that to Thursday's agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. Thank you for the presentation. Well done. Now moving on to item number 6, Navarre Beach Fishing Pier Operations and Management. This is primarily to have us establish what the process is going to be as we now have had the RFP. Tony, go to you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just, we are officially presenting these to you, and the thought process was that you would consider these and then at a subsequent meeting to shortlist 3, 4, whatever number the board's comfortable with. You can make a final determination about that and then establish in terms of the process for whatever your shortlist might be, possibly establish October the 9th as a time to hear that shortlist. We could set that time, whether that be in the morning at the regular meeting or set a 1:30 time in the afternoon to hear those, that shortlist proposals.
Okay. I think it'd be great if staff, maybe it would help us have a better gauge of what time we should have the meeting, if you had recommendations on how long the presentation and subsequent Q&A might be with each one of the 3 presenters. That would give us an opportunity to decide if we want to do it at the meeting or at a separate meeting. I like your 1:30 suggestion. That seems to me like that makes sense. And this is why we start this process when we did. I think the lease runs out December 31st. So this still gives us plenty of time this gives every commissioner a month to look at the 11 proposals, reach out to any of them that you have questions about, and then come back and we could shortlist it to 3 and then go from there. Does anybody, any board members have any questions or concerns? Commissioner Parker?
Thank you. I guess maybe a suggestion would be, since we're going to have to somewhat agree on the top 3, it may be a little bit more realistic if we, say, change that number to 5, because that way if somebody's got an outlier that the other board members, maybe wasn't in their top 3, we could at least say maybe get it down to the top 5. And I like the idea of having it as a sort of a standalone meeting, or like I guess you're talking about at a 1:30 in the afternoon on a meeting date. That way, it could be just that issue, and we could have ample time to allow them. I don't know. I don't know if you had a presentation amount in mind, but maybe 20 minutes with a 10 or 15 minute Q&A follow-up for each one. It's a significant project. Those have been my only comments.
Appreciate the comments, and I agree with the time limit and having it that standalone meeting. I agree this is a significant project to the county. Definitely entertain other comments from the board. Commissioner Lynchard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think after we go through the list of proposals, perhaps on the date that we do shortlist, we can decide ahead of time whether we want 3, 4, or 5. 3 might be cutting it too close. 5, if we have a 45-minute section per each, then we're going to run pretty long in the interview and review process, and that tends to favor the people who present first, because everybody's kind of winding down after a 3-hour meeting. But I think we'll shoot for somewhere between 3 and 5, and then let's, before we shortlist on that day, determine whether we want the top 3, 4, or 5, and then we'll each select, say it's 4, we'll select 4. They won't be ranked, they'll just be our 4 choices, and then the top 4 choice getters, vote getters, out of all of the applicants would be the ones who then present at the October meeting.
Okay. Vice Chairman Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like it on record, and I know county attorney's not here today, that there's nothing unethical, no violation that we're breaking and discussing on an individual basis with any of these applicants. And I just want to make sure that's clear.
Commissioner Lynchard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think, get your legal advice from Roy, but I don't think, we don't have a local blackout period. Santa Rosa County doesn't have a local blackout ordinance, but I have always taken the approach that I don't speak to applicants or people who send in a request for proposal between the time that the notice goes out and the time that we review. That's up to each individual commissioner, absent some other prohibition on discussions.
And
But I would start
agree.
to speak with Roy first.
Agree with that policy. It's just there's so many applicants, you don't know who you're going to run into on the street or, just somebody come up to you. So I just wanted to make sure that was on record. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I followed the same policy up until the point where, once the RFP has been opened and now we know who is eligible, then I feel like we have a month time period where if commissioners had questions about the reports that have been brought forward, that would provide an opportunity during that month to get your questions answered, and that would enable you a better opportunity to shortlist instead of just basing your shortlisting on the presentation. You'd have an opportunity to reach out to any of the 11 applicants to get questions answered. Is that what you were speaking about, Commissioner Lynchard, or you were saying that you don't, even after the RFP is done?
I typically don't speak with anyone when anything's pending before the board, rezoning's included. I know that frustrates some people that I won't talk to an applicant that has a rezoning pending before the board, but I just think it's best practice not to. That's just me.
No, I hear you. For zoning board, I've done the same. This one here, just me personally, when I look at the 11 different applications, now that the RFP is behind us and we know who we're going to be choosing from, these are the 11 folks that we're going to be choosing from. For me, it's kind of difficult to shortlist to 3 without having an opportunity to maybe get some questions answered. And since we're not going to have a presentation from any of the applicants until we've shortlisted, that's just me. I probably will have a few questions for a few of them. I also believe that getting it down to that 3 to 5 is probably pretty good at that point. You've got a month to review the applications if you choose to talk to them or not. Probably should be able to get it down to between 3 and 5. So we won't nail down whether it's 3, 4, or 5 now, but as far as the timing goes, we will move that to the consent agenda on Thursday. The timing has been recommended by staff that they'll have the September 11th, 14th meetings, and then the October 9th meeting would be when they would do a presentation. We'll be shooting for sometime in the afternoon. And would move that to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. Item number 7, surplus property. Straightforward, you see the 2 items there that are designated surplus to have an opportunity to dispose of those. I would move that to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. Item number 8 is meeting times, discussing 2018 meeting schedule and also revisiting the request by Commissioner Parker and recommendation on evening meetings. Tony?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there was a request to bring back the discussion relative to evening meetings. I thought I'd take the opportunity to go ahead and include some things about just looking forward to the 2018 schedule. I think both are need to go hand in hand. I did go ahead and include the school board calendar each year for the last couple of years or longer probably. We have canceled the spring break meeting. And so if the board wanted to kind of just have an initial discussion about 2018 calendar, give us any direction as we start to put that together to bring back for more or less adoption in the future, That would just help if you have any other ideas on putting that 18 calendar together, whether that's a night meeting or otherwise.
Okay, I think it provides us an opportunity now for each board member, as the 2018 schedule is being considered, to get together with Tony, provide any recommendations that you might have for that June, July time period, or spring break, or if there is, if you have a recommendation for maybe adding an evening meeting in or something like that, and then Tony can try to incorporate that into his recommendations as he creates our 2018 schedule. So that kind of seems like the best way forward. No action necessarily for Thursday, but that each board member would be getting together with Tony to help create recommendations for the 2018 schedule. Commissioner Parker, I see your light's on.
Yes, sir. Talked with Mr. Goodmillion about this very briefly before today, and I'm just afraid if we do an individual approach, he might be getting pulled in 5 different directions. I don't know if the board would support maybe the thought of one evening meeting per month, or even if we just designated to do it the first quarter of the year and then reevaluate. I mean, I know I've heard from at least 2 board members, because we didn't have a full board when we talked about this, that this did happen in the past, and there wasn't really noticeable increased attendance. But it is something that I hear periodically from folks out in the community, that they feel like, my first assumption is that attendance would not be significantly increased, if any. But I know we hear from folks sometimes that say they would like to be able to come if it was in the evening. So I don't know if the rest of the board would maybe consider, if we did one of our committee meetings, maybe the first one of the month in the evening time, even if we just designated that as the first quarter there of the calendar year, and then reevaluate it to see, did attendance increase? Is it something that the citizens seem favorable to? Or if it's not an increase, I know Tony had suggested there could be possible, obviously, issues with either staffs working a really long day, or we're trying to figure out how to flex them off or pay them. From a personal standpoint, I can say I sort of had some of those thoughts years ago about, well, it's frustrating if I wanted to, watch the meeting, I couldn't go, and thankfully we now have video you can go back and watch, but it's a little harder for folks to come, especially in the daytime. I mean, if somebody's here today for the public forum event, you've got to be prepared to sit here for a couple hours and basically miss a half day's work. So I would be in favor of at least one night meeting per month, to where if folks just wanted to talk to the board collectively, they would at least know there's one time a month they could come and do it in the evening time. But I don't know if I don't want to try to get individually with Tony on that, because if I'm the only one that feels that way, then it's a dead issue right now, and that way he's not spending time on it, is what I'm getting at.
Commissioner Salter.
Mr. Chairman, as I said in the past, we've had night meetings before, very little participation. You end up paying staff overtime or giving them the next day off. We're already pretty lean in our departments, so if we give them the next day off and they're not at work doing their job. So unless there's an extreme situation where we need to have night meetings, I say continue doing what we're doing. If an issue comes up, we can call a special meeting at night and address that issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Salter. Vice Chairman Cole.
Mr. Chairman, my comments will just reflect Commissioner Salters. I was on the board when we, first on the board when we did have evening meetings, and there was no more attendance than we see now, so agree with Commissioner Salter.
Commissioner Lynchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree, in addition, we do have the special rezoning meeting nightly, once a month. So we could always offer some type of expanded public forum at that rezoning meeting to take public input, if that's the direction the board wants to go. So the other thing, I support the taking a look at the calendar next year. One thing to think about. We had, everybody tries to travel a little bit in the summer, and we did that this summer. We had some meetings where we were 3 of us here, 4 of us here. I know I missed a meeting, getting ready to travel. So next summer, let's take a look at when our meetings fall and look at the possibility of changing up the schedule so that we do have a 2-week break somewhere in the summer rather than a meeting every other week. Makes it a little easier to schedule family trips, makes it easier for staff to schedule family trips if there's a 2-week break rather than just a series of 1-week breaks, 1-week meeting intervals throughout the summer. So just something to look at.
Agree with that. I think, you mentioned public comment, Commissioner Parker, and I appreciate you bringing this forward, by the way. I mean, it's in response to requests that we get, and I heard the same thing. I think we've all heard it from time to time that, I'd come to a meeting if they had them at night, not during the day. And then we have commissioners that have been serving for a while that had meetings at night, and then we heard, well, if you had the meetings during the daytime, I could have made it, but you had the meetings at night. But I do think that, you mentioned public comment. If you believe that, always looking for ways to improve the meeting, that we should move public comment to the beginning of the meeting, that's usually the preference of the chair, but that would be something that I would certainly consider if you thought that would be a benefit. And as far as evening meetings, as we're looking at the 2018 schedule, I think just like we added meetings each quarter in the south end of the county, that we should be looking to add at least 1 or 2 meetings in the evening during 2018's calendar year. When we move into the next fiscal year, I think it's a good suggestion, Commissioner Parker, and I don't think it's too much to ask that if we give enough time to plan it, that staff could hopefully find 2 dates on the calendar throughout the year where maybe we could have a regularly scheduled county commission committee meeting in the evening. And then make sure that the schedule is put together accordingly. We wouldn't want to have, 3 or 4 presentations or anything like that. We'd have to try to build the schedule accordingly. But that would be something that I would be willing to take a look at, where certainly every month I feel may be too much, but a couple of times a year would maybe provide an opportunity to give everybody a little bit of improvement that they're looking for. And hopefully, County Administrator has enough information on that. We don't have an item to bring back on Thursday's agenda. One good discussion. Item number 9, school zone speed display sign. This was added by Vice Chairman Cole. Vice Chairman Cole, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. East Milton School has had a problem with speeding along Ward Basin Road, and I'd just like to ask the board, I'd like to work with our Public Works Department through Steve Furman and work with the school on providing some additional speed display signing. It's kind of unique in the fact that Ward Basin Road is a connector road. A lot of our schools are on secondary roads or in subdivisions, different places, whereas Ward Basin Road connects the interstate, Hickory Hammock Road with Highway 90. And, I've been speaking with one of the volunteers down there that basically says you take your life in your hands trying to keep it safe down there. So the signage that's currently there is pretty old, malfunctions sometimes, and I'm just asking the board to okay up to $18,000, which would be $9,000 per sign or less, so I can move forward with that. I hope to have it done prior to the school year starting and running a little behind on it, and that was the reason for my request at this time. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that would come out of District 2 funds also.
Okay. I think it's a good request, and I like the fact that you're going to be working with the school board too, to make sure that's a kind of a joint deal. And I would love to explore this further with staff for maybe a few areas in Holly by the Sea where we might look at, is there a couple areas down there that it would be a benefit? But I never even considered this until Vice Chairman Cole put it on the agenda, so it's something I'll definitely be working with staff on. There's no other questions or comments from the board. I move this to Thursday's agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, this is moved to Thursday's consent agenda. Item number 10, the addition of a FY17 project for, this is additional $75,000 for the J Fire Department. You have the information in your backup. This will ultimately save them significant funding from interest, I believe. And I would move this. There's no questions or comments from the board. I would move this item to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. Item number 11 is the local option sales tax fiscal year 2018 project list. This has been reviewed by the LOST Citizen Committee. I actually sat in on a good portion of that committee, had some very good questions, some very good commentary, and was ultimately unanimously approved by our LOST committee. I will now move to Tony for this item.
Yes, Dan's going to take it. He kind of been leading the charge on this.
Morning, Dan.
So you can see this list includes, it's been revised slightly. The significant difference from what we discussed in previous meetings is the jail air conditioning system conversion project has been moved to the general fund. That funding is reallocated, and $2.5 million is allocated to the Tiburon stormwater project that was discussed at the last meeting. Everything else is pretty much in line with what has been discussed since the February workshop through the April public meetings, with just minor revisions. The request fully funds the sheriff's FY18 capital request with allowable LOST expenditures. About $2.8 million for the sheriff's department is in that request. It reflects, I think, the priority that the board has set for public safety as well as transportation and drainage. The vast majority of the funds, $14.8 million total in this FY18 LOST request, is going to public safety and transportation and drainage. The other aspect of this is that is more than the projected LOST revenue for FY17 and 18. So there would be an internal loan from general fund unassigned balance to front load those projects, and that money would just be repaid to the general fund unassigned balance when it comes in.
Thank you, Dan. And any members of the board have any questions or comments about this list? I think it is a good list in that it does mirror what the community has told us they wanted, and we've had some minor tweaks. This has gone along the way and got that comment. I would ask a request of my fellow commissioners between now and Thursday, and we'll provide the backup data on that. But as one thing I think we need to make sure we consider is we did hear from quite a few folks about adding additional youth athletic space, particularly in South County, and that I'm looking forward to working with my fellow commissioner in the South End as we look to FY19, and maybe we can work throughout this year to add a significant project to the list that would have us maybe sharing some rec funds and some resources to see if we could add a dedicated youth athletic space down there to add a significant number of fields, you know, something in the range of 8 to 12 fields that could serve as a tourism draw and as well as help relieve a lot of the pressure that we have from the unbelievable amount of use that we have down there. Because as we've talked about before, $200,000 seems like an extraordinary sum of money, and it is, but when you start talking about playgrounds and parks, and it doesn't go as far as you might think. The other request I have is specific to giving us the ability as commissioners to go and our grant staff the ability to go after additional funding. And I'm speaking specifically of stormwater drainage projects. Before we can move forward with the Tiburon project, we have to get engineering, planning, and design done. And so we had to allocate dollars for that first. The same with Sunrise Drive, and the same with Camden Drive, and the same with Tom King Bayou, and every one of the projects that's on this list. Before we can get to construction, we've got to have engineering, permitting, and design in the funnel. We have to have those working. And I had requested that staff give me what they believe to be the next highest priority stormwater projects in the South County. And they came up with some projects on Crittenden Drive, Aurora Drive, Sunrise, East Bay, and Palmetto Drive. And they range from, goodness, $1.8 million in construction costs on Palmetto Drive down to $250,000 on East Bay Drive. And I'm not asking for the board to add the construction cost to the FY18 list. What I would like to provide you ahead of Thursday is the engineering, permitting, and design costs associated with these projects. It totals right at $520,000 for these 5 projects that staff has identified as the next highest priority stormwater drainage projects. And I would like to have you consider adding those, approving, moving forward with the engineering, permitting, and design of those projects to where we can get them shelf-ready, we can get them grant-ready, and then we will have a number of projects that we could possibly use funding that we already have available in future years, or at minimum, we could go and add it to our legislative priorities in the state, or we could go after grant funding opportunities, federal, state, wherever they might be, to see if we could get some of these projects funded. But we can't go after the funding for them if we don't get them in the pipeline and get them in the funnel first. So I just wanted to put that out to my fellow commissioners, that the total price tag for the 5 projects that will be coming to you for the permitting, the engineering, permitting, and design only would be right at $520,000. And these projects were identified by staff as the next highest stormwater drainage priorities in the southern portion of the county. And get those to you and see if we could include that in our project list for FY18 before this is absolutely finalized. Vice Chairman Cole.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the plan as you described it, but the assistant administrator also said that the 14.8 was slightly over what we expected to take in. So the other $500,000 for the project design, do you have a suggestion as to where that would come from?
Well, there'd be 2 options. One is we do, outside of the loss, we do have money that I believe we need to start putting to work, and that is in road and bridge reserves, but that is unrestricted. I would prefer if we would use, we have some of these projects, I believe we are going to be loaning money from the general fund that will be paid back from lost dollars later, and I would just add that we add that to the total. So basically, instead of us allocating $14.7 million this year, that we would allocate $15.2 million in FY18.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Salter.
I would prefer us to do a comprehensive look and not just South County. I know that Pace has had some major problems in the past, so let's don't limit a potential project list just to South County. Let's look at all of our potential major drainage areas and then come up with a longer-term plan on how we're going to address those projects and how we're going to pay for them.
And I appreciate that comment, Commissioner Salter. And my original request from staff was to provide what are the highest 2 or 3 priorities south of I-10 and the highest 2 or 3 priorities north of I-10. And staff provided recommendations with pricing in South County. We also have recommendations of next highest stormwater drainage priorities in the other portions of the county. There just were no prices associated with them. Bottom line, my fear is that we have projects that are already in the funnel. They're already being developed. A lot of these projects that we see on the list, we had already previously approved those, and we're just now allocating lost dollars to pay for them. But when we start talking about new projects, you know, all the ones here, whether it be Godwin Connector or Venetian Way, Ranchette, Settlers Colony, we already approved all of those. There's projects, you know, Patterson Pace Lane, Marantha Chipper Lane, Peerage, those were already, well, not the Peerage Connector, but those 2 projects there, Patterson Pace Lane, Marantha Chipper Lane, those were already previously approved projects. Sunrise Drive, previously approved project. So I'm trying to look at how we can show the community that we are not only allocating lost dollars effectively, but that we're also taking action to add additional projects to bring relief sooner rather than continuing to wait on some of these. So if there are North County projects or projects in the Pace area outside of the $2.5 million for Tiburon that was allocated as a new project, I'd welcome adding the engineering and design to that. I can only speak to my district, so I recommended the pricing for the ones in the district there. And if we're not going to do the whole 520, if we could identify maybe a couple of additional ones, I'm just trying to figure out how we can get additional projects funded where we can start working on the engineering, permitting, and design and get more projects in the funnel that would translate to results sooner rather than later. Would that be something that you'd be willing to consider if maybe, is it the 520 amount that is a little bit too much and you'd like me to come down off that?
Mr. Chairman, looking at the list, the draft project list for fiscal year 18, all those projects you just named, it shows them as part of that list. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So the money is already going to be there in 2018?
Yes, I guess the difference is those are projects that before we even had a local option sales tax, we had already agreed to allocate resources toward. They're not quote-unquote new projects that the board is putting efforts toward. The only difference is we're now, instead of paying those with general fund reserve dollars, we're paying for those with lost dollars. But at the end of the day, we're not putting any additional effort towards solving the problems that we have. Those projects were already in the pipeline. What I'm talking about is adding $500,000 to this that would add additional $500,000 and 5 projects to our existing projects to help us get additional resources towards stormwater drainage, to get additional improvements that we don't currently have listed here. The only new project that we have here, Commissioner Salter, if it relates to stormwater drainage that we weren't previously working on, maybe because of funding, is the Tiburon project. That's a new one that's listed there. And we could say Tom King Bayou. So we have in the county, related to stormwater drainage, we have 2 new projects that we weren't previously working on. Commissioner Parker?
Thank you. Try to stay really brief. I think that is a terrific idea as far as getting things shelf ready and instead of maybe ahead of the curve to where when the time came to fund them. Only 2, I get other comments I would have is, I don't even remember what the topic was, but y'all know I publicly say it. Commissioner Lynchard's my favorite down there on keeping me straight, and he had talked about the integrity of the process. I don't remember what it was, but since we already put this in front of the Lost Committee and they approved it, I would hate to change it this late in the game. With that being said, it's already been stated that we're pulling out of one pot and repaying. So I think the compromise that I would sort of envision out of the comments I've heard today would be to take your idea of getting some things ahead of time and take Commissioner Salter's idea of looking at comprehensive countywide and then blending that, because there's nothing that said if we got to take it out of general unassigned funds, there's nothing to say that that can't be done down the road, but it wouldn't jeopardize the integrity of the, really very precious in the infancy stage of the citizen committee that's already met. I would not want to go back and add to or take away from something they've already approved. And the third comment, and I just say this for, we definitely have some very esteemed members of the community here in the audience, and just to re-clarify, even though some of these were already identified projects that have been identified for several years, even some of these HMGP, it was still I'm speaking for my family and my children and future generation, very thankful that the local option sales tax was passed. I wish it would have been passed in 2006 and we could have been seeing the rewards of it. But the reason I, again, just want to reiterate, even though these are projects that the county had identified a need out of, thankfully this revenue, I don't want to make it seem like it's not being used for anything new, because these are projects that either A, would not have been able to have been completed, even though they were identified, or B, we would have had to use all of the reserves that we, have for whether it be disasters or other things, or increase ad valorem. So I remember the board, I wasn't on it, but y'all, during the meetings that I watched, had talked extensively about just being able to accomplish these identified needs without raising ad valorem. So I just don't want people to get the mindset of we're really just losing loss to do something we'd have done anyway, because I think the only way they would have done it anyway would have been to have raised ad valorem. And so I only say that because I want the public to, I can only speak for myself and my family, but we are so thankful that the citizens finally, allowed us to utilize local option sales tax, because we see what it's done for Escambia County with the hundreds of millions they've had for infrastructure over the last couple of decades. So those would be my comments. I just want to protect the integrity of the process at this point, since we do have the citizens that have been involved with that committee.
Okay. I appreciate the comments, and I guess I will circle back and I'll make it as a standalone recommendation, and that the $500,000 would, we can decide if it would be associated with the lost, or if my fellow board members would approve it, I'll add it to the next set of meetings, that we would look at the engineering, permitting, and design for these next set of priorities, and the 520 for these 5 projects would be definitely, we can determine if we think that it's got a good return on investment and a good value. Just in echoing your concerns with wanting to take action and why I supported your Tiburon project, even though it was definitely a departure from the way we had handled, this board had handled projects of that nature in the past, Commissioner Parker, was that I believe I agreed with you that folks did want to see action. And we're looking at a $3.2 million project there, and it's not about one project in one district over another. It's about getting things in the funnel, because these take such a long sales cycle. They take so long to develop and actually get done, from the time you identify the need to the time the community is being negatively impacted to the time that we actually get a construction project done and relief to these homeowners. And these 5 projects that staff have identified that I'll be forwarding to you for the next set of meetings, I think you'll see that they'll provide a tremendous amount of value in the Holly by the Sea area and in South County, and they'll help solve problems, and they'll help us take some action. We do have enough money in road and bridge reserves, and as I think about it, it's very similar to that other project, where I think we're taking the money for the permitting, engineering, and design for Tiburon, which is around $600,000 or so. We're taking that from road and bridge reserves. So I would come back and recommend that these projects we could also take from road and bridge reserves if the board were to agree with that. But sorry if we took things a little sidetracked there, but I wanted to provide at least the opportunity for those to be funded from FY lost dollars before going to unrestricted road and bridge reserves. But it doesn't look like there's support for that, so I'll bring that request back at the next set of meetings. Wallace?
Wallace Mahout, 5500 Cox Road. I just wanted to say that I agree with Commissioner Williamson, and I agree with Commissioner Salter. You do want to be looking ahead and planning, forward planning, and you do want to look at the county as a whole as far as important projects. So I would encourage each and every one of you to maybe go ahead and do what Commissioner Williamson did and try to get a handle on what staff feels is future, the most important future projects for the county as a whole, and work from there. You have some lost money now that you can work with.
So it's not like you don't have any money, but I would encourage you to find out what the problems are in every district of the county and work from there. Thank you.
Thank you. And if there's no further comments or questions from the board on this item, then I'm prepared to move it to Thursday's agenda. Vice Chairman Cole, you good? Okay, then I will move this item to Thursday's agenda without objection. Consent agenda without objection. I tell you what, we'll leave that on the regular agenda if between now and Thursday, that's a big item. We might have members of the public that want to speak on that. And I know we'll have the Holly by the Sea folks here as well. They might have something to say about that discussion. And I move that to the regular agenda without objection. We now have the item up that was number 5 on the engineering department. We have several members of the public that are here. And so before I go to that item, I'll go to Vice Chairman Cole. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 10:30. 10:30. Okay, we'll bring the meeting back to order, and moving on to, moving up the item number 5 of engineering, up to behind the item number 11, next item on our list. And I will go to, Tony, you want me to go to Roger, or are you going to take this one?
Well, I'll start it out, Roger, and would be, Mr. Burden is here, and he may want to address the board with United Bank, from United Bank. Mr. Burden, I believe, had spoken with you. There's some information in your backup relative to the general layout of that Highway 90 6-lane ingress egress project. And he had spoken to us about concerns over the access and the impacts it would have on those residents and businesses in the Diamond Street area. So, Mr. Burden, would you want to speak to that?
Mr. Chairman?
Vice Chairman Cole?
Thank you. If I could kind of cue us up a little bit. I read the packet that got from United Bank and through Jerry, and it kind of tied in with a conversation I had with several of the businesses along Glover Lane. We've got a lot going on in Santa Rosa County with Highway 90 over the next few years. I'm working with DOT. And if you all recall, right after they come up with the idea of the realignment of Glover Lane, which would align it with old Highway 90 and come across the old Ford dealership, they immediately came to us wanting us to sign on board with a resolution, kind of like, hurry up, let's get this done type thing. After further investigation and conversation with folks along Glover Lane and Highway 90, coming to find out, although at first brush just seemed like a great idea, it really would adversely affect those businesses. Now, several weeks later, we have the comments from Mr. Burden and United Bank to even went to the degree of, having an engineering firm reinvestigate this, because DOT seemed pretty much completely, this is the way it's going to be type thing, and didn't want to revisit it. So my concern is now that we've had 2 situations like this, where it seems there's not a concern for the business entities that are already along our road, that we need to voice something to DOT, listen to these folks that have the businesses, and pretty much work with DOT to get a better handle on this design as we move forward. So Jerry has a presentation available for us, and Jerry, I'm just going to turn it over now to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Following up on what Commissioner Cole said, yes, we do have some concerns about the design of the PD&E as it applies to Diamond Street and Highway 90. I would like to preface my comments and my statement by the fact that we do acknowledge, and I think we can all probably agree that there is a need to improve the traffic load on Highway 90. We recognize that the Department of Transportation has a very difficult task in developing that plan, but we also recognize that the plan may not accommodate everyone's wishes. However, after reviewing this study, there was concern about the proposed configuration at Highway 90 and Diamond Street, and that's why I'm here today, because I do feel like it merits some discussion. I would like to say that I didn't give my name and address. You need that now?
If you wouldn't mind, just put that on the record, thanks.
Yeah, Jerry Burden, 5686 Pin Oak Avenue, Milton, Florida. Sorry about that. I will say this. Let me give you just a little brief message from United Bank. I am an employee of United Bank. United Bank is an independent community bank out of Atmore, Alabama. We have 3 offices in Santa Rosa County. One of those offices is at Pace and Diamond Street. And yes, from the looks of the plan, we would have probably some adverse impact if that plan carries forward, along with several other businesses along that stretch of Highway 90 and down Diamond Street, as well as other organizations down Diamond Street, such as churches. And like several of the other businesses along that stretch, we like to consider ourselves a good corporate citizen in the neighborhoods and the communities that we have our offices in. And in this case, you know, we like to be part of the neighborhood. We strive to be part of the neighborhood. And as part of that neighborhood, we felt compelled to actually move forward and engage a consulting firm. We did get Baskerville Donovan to go back and ask them to look at this plan and determine if there were any viable alternatives that may be possible. That report, I think, was handed to you a couple of weeks back, and hopefully you've had time to look at it. Just a brief synopsis going through the report is that, you know, I wish to point out that Diamond Street is a main collector/feeder road for the residents from Highway 90 to Florida Town and even down to the Tamako access gate located at the end of Diamond Road. The study recommends closing the median crossing, the median cut to westbound traffic at Highway 90 and Diamond Street. By closing that left turn median, or closing that median cut so left turns will not be accessible onto Diamond Road. With the plan and the study in place, those cars would that traffic would have to go all the way to Woodbine Road, where there is no left turn lane. So then they would be forced to turn right on Woodbine Road and go up a ways, do a U-turn, come back to the light, do a left turn, come back in onto Highway 90 to get to Diamond Street. However, there's also no deceleration lane in the plan for that intersection at Diamond Street either. So that's going to kind of add to an issue that really comes out to be a public safety issue. If you've got cars leaving Diamond Road that can't turn left to go to Pensacola, they're going to have to turn right across multiple lanes of traffic in a short span of movement to get to a directional turn, to take a U-turn, to turn left and go back toward Pensacola. That directional turn is across from A Street, pretty much right in the Downs Automotive area. That directional turn, there's one directional turn going east and one going west. But if the traffic misses either one of those turns, they're going to have to go all the way back up to Fifth Avenue to make a turn. What the proposed plan is to put traffic onto A Street, which would then route traffic down either A Street or Third Avenue to connect to Diamond Road. Those are very narrow, paved roads. They're roads, they're not necessarily streets. There does not appear to be any kind of widening ability to those roads. Those are on 20-mile-an-hour roads in a residential community. You would be putting an awful lot of traffic onto those roads. Our study showed that on the 27th of April, the consultant did a independent traffic count and determined that approximately, if you extrapolate out what your report shows when you see it, about 1,850 automobiles would be turning onto Diamond Road, either coming leftbound or either going eastbound or westbound. A lot of that traffic would then be dumped onto A Street and Third Avenue and put down those residential streets with 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. And those streets are barely wide enough to accommodate two vehicles as two lanes. The other concern there, it keeps coming back to public safety, because having conversation with Pace Fire and Rescue District, they determined it would be awfully difficult for their first responders to take those fire trucks down those roads. If any other traffic were there, they would have a real problem in navigating those streets, plus the fact that Diamond Street, and it's pointed out in the letter that is part of the packet, that Diamond Street is that collector road that runs all the way down to Tamako, and that's part of their emergency access. It should, God forbid, anything happen at that plant where people had to be removed from the neighborhoods. That in itself is a major concern for the public safety of that whole neighborhood that's south of Highway 90 down to Florida Town Road, and probably on beyond Florida Town Road. Could always go down to the to the plant entrance. So what I have asked you to do is take a look at the report that's there. There's crash data that goes back from 2011 to 2015 that shows that most of the accidents that occurred either to the east or to the west of that intersection were actually rear to front crashes that were caused by rear-ending, either slowing down at the traffic light at Woodbine or slowing down traffic that was going east. Very few of the crashes occurred with cars that were leaving Diamond Street going on to Highway 90. So the crash reports kind of indicate that perhaps continuing to have a turn there would not be detrimental. The other thing the report shows is that stretch of highway from the Champaign County River Bridge up to long about Chumuckla Highway is a Class 3 highway and roadway, and the Class 3 is very restrictive based on the points of interest. But when you look at why it has restricted points of interest, a large percentage of that road from there to Woodbine, Santa Rosa County line to Woodbine, is swamp and does not have access. With the report also points out that with the building and commercial improvements along Highway 90, that it's entirely possible that they should revisit that classification to either a 4 or a 5, which would not put it in the category where you cannot have a turn lane within 2,700 feet of an intersection. So I would ask that these facts be considered before anybody signs off totally on this plan. That's my request.
Thank you for presenting that, and the study and the manner in which you have gone about this is consistent with the way you've conducted yourself with a great many things in this county, and that is with professionalism and class. So thank you for that. Thank you, Commissioner Cole, for putting this on the agenda so we can discuss it before it would ultimately end up at a TPO meeting. As I look at and review the study, the only question I would have is I agree that I have no problem with leaving a decel lane if you were heading west on Highway 90 to turn onto Diamond Street. My issue would be continuing to allow folks to leave Diamond Street and turn west going across Highway 90. If it would be possible to have a no left out of Diamond Street to where someone would have to turn right and they would go up to, I think it's the Pace Medical Park up there at 5th, and that's where there's currently a turn lane. There could be a U-turn done there or at the light, or as further improvements or the planning of the widening of Highway 90 is considered, there could be additional considerations given there. But my concern is folks are coming up to Woodbine. If they don't catch that red light there, they're going to be going at 55 miles an hour. They come around that corner there at Diamond Street, and if we're allowing folks to continue to go left, when it becomes 6-lane, you're basically allowing folks to go across 3 lanes of traffic to turn left. I don't know if that would be a possible compromise that the board would consider, but that would be something I could support, to leave the existing turn lane into Diamond Lane, but when leaving Diamond Lane, it would be a right turn only.
I would point out that the consultant's suggestions is that there would be a directional turn there for traffic going westbound to do a left turn onto Diamond Road. That was have that directional turn there. That was one of the recommendations, which probably may be the most viable as far as traffic is concerned and traffic flow. Would it be great if you could turn left to continue to go to Pensacola? Because a lot of people come down Diamond Street, make a left turn, go to work. And if you're in an ambulance on your way to a trauma center, you'd kind of like for them to take the most direct route to get to Highway 90 to get you to a hospital in Pensacola if necessary. But the directional turn is probably, was the first recommendation that you saw in that package that in that report that we presented you. So I appreciate your comments on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Cole, then Commissioner Parker.
Thank you. My suggestion is going to be that we draft a letter from the board for the chairman to sign, something to the effect that we would respectfully ask DOT to revisit, due to the complaints that we've had from business inputs in 2 different locations, that we respectfully ask DOT to revisit the planning and make sure that it's made known in, for the public to review any new plans and changes. At this point, there's no meeting dates set yet for that I've heard of or been able to find out about for further review and public input on any of this project. So that what I'd like to see is us just draft a letter asking DOT to please revisit these projects, especially Glover Lane and Diamond Street, and any other concerns that perhaps our engineering department could point out, and that in the future, as part of their planning, I believe I was told that consideration for the traffic into a business or the equity of a business is not part of their planning process, and it certainly should be. If in planning and changing our community, in the face of our community and the flow of traffic in our community results in businesses going out of business, then we've missed the mark. And I'd like to see that inclusive in their planning process.
Thank you. One thing I would like to point out I did not bring up is I also included in your packet photographs of the streets that are proposed for that traffic to be diverted down. And it's going to cost a lot of money to maintain those roads, if not improve those roads, and that bearing that cost will be on the county. But thank you for your time. I would appreciate a letter, because I would like to have a meeting with DOT in the future. If I had a letter of support, it would be probably more meaningful. So thank you for your time.
Commissioner Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you. That was what I was, I guess, a blend of the 2 former commissioners that speak was what I was prepared to support and ask for, is I guess it'd be a letter or a resolution if the board could ask them to revisit this particular intersection. I wasn't necessarily thinking the entire project, but this particular intersection, and maybe submit that with, or at least refer them to examining the Baskerville-Donovan study. I think the timing of what Commissioner Cole's talking about is perfect. I've been directing a lot of folks about a separate issue dealing with DOT that we're going to hear about here in a minute to our state representative and former county commissioner, Jared Williamson. And they are coming for, it says, I guess, a legislative update to talk to us and tell us about the wonderful things happening in Tallahassee on Thursday. I think would be the perfect time to express to them as well, being a DOT project, that maybe they could go back and try to champion the idea that DOT is getting all this funding from sales tax, so maybe they should pay attention to the economics of doing these roadways, since that's what's funding their projects. Are these businesses, and I know we're way over here in the Panhandle and we don't get the clout that they do in South Florida, but I would be glad to express that to them Thursday. So I don't know if that's something, I'm going to lean to Commissioner Lynchard as our quasi board attorney today. Is that something we could ask staff to prepare for Thursday, like Commissioner Cole mentioned, that they would revisit or at least reconsider this intersection, or submit this study to them? Or
Commissioner Lynchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say, I certainly understand the concerns of you, Mr. Burden, and the bank, and all the other property owners and affected businesses around there, and would support having this board reach out to FDOT, request them to take another look at this particular segment in conjunction with the design plans that you had prepared and the review that you had prepared by Baskerville Donovan. And I would suggest we move that to Thursday. I don't know about asking for any broader guidance at this point. Let's stick to this one intersection so we can key in on it and let FDOT know that we want them to take another look at it.
Yeah, and I think, as the current TPO chair, that's something that I'm certainly willing to make that recommendation as well to the district secretary. But I think this is part of the process. This is, nothing has been decided. I'm certainly not here to speak on behalf of DOT, but I think, this has not been decided, and this is the time for us now as a board to reach back out to DOT and say, we would like you to reconsider how you're currently scheduling the configuration of this intersection and the impact it would have specifically in Diamond Street. And if the board is not prepared to make any more detailed recommendations on that at this time, that's fine, but I think getting them to reconsider that intersection and let them know that we're not happy with their current plan, that's what they want. They want direction, and if they don't have direction, then they're going to keep going in the direction that they believe is best. And so now I think you're hearing today that we'll get that direction, that new direction that we would prefer over to DOT, and hopefully we'll have a different plan as it relates to this intersection when they unveil the next set of improvements for the widening of Highway 90.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Cole, and then another
Mr.
member of the public that would like to speak?
I would just like to ask Commissioner Lynchard if he'd support also, if we're not going to do all Highway 90, at least also include the Glover Lane segment, because with this.
I would. Did we not ask FDOT to take a look at that already?
We have, but I'd just like to maybe reiterate it to them and see where they're at with that, make sure, because I haven't heard nothing new other than our request, so maybe just reiterate the two.
I would. I'd like to keep them separate. I think it's more effective.
Okay.
But yeah, we can send out another letter as well on the Glover
Okay.
Lane.
All right.
Have a
And
follow-up with staff for where we are on that, and if necessary, to send out another engagement letter for
okay.
Commissioner Cole's request, along with the new one for Diamond Street.
And a lot of talk has gone around from the public that DOT is going to do what they want to do regardless. And I got it straight from the district secretary, Philip Gaynor, that they invite this type of input, and they want this type of input. So this is, as Commissioner Williamson said, the chair said, this is great conversation, right time.
Absolutely. Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Ricky Downs, 5205 Hawks Nest Drive. I represent our family business, which is the Badcock Furniture on Glover Lane at 4815 Glover Lane. We've been there at that location over 40 years, been in Milton over 43. And to kind of go on the back of what Commissioner Cole was just stating, is we would like on the Glover Lane part of this as well. They sent asking for y'all to put in a resolution to move the road, and they had multiple options. One of the options they did give was leaving the road there and widening it at the end in front of our property and in front of Milton Dodge. And we are in support of that. We know that there's issues that need to be fixed at Glover Lane. There's too many accidents at that intersection. But realigning the road and moving it and shutting off, for all the businesses down there. The businesses that I'm in contact with that have all gave me their support, said that I could speak for them today. There's 8 businesses down that trek of Glover Lane. It's basically like a commerce section, the section that would be moved. In that section, there's over 100 employees that work at those businesses that would be adversely affected by the move. And if the intersection's moved, the traffic flow to that area would be put down so far that, I mean, we know we couldn't support our type of retail business there. There's some businesses down there that could probably still survive, but their traffic flow would be greatly reduced. But any of them like us, Milton Carpet, General Rental, any of those that are retail based are gonna have to move somewhere. Where they're wanting to move the road is all wetland, so that's not, you're not going to be able to move a commerce place from one side to another and then build businesses down that road because you can't build there. So you're basically taking, like Commissioner Cole was saying, that you take sales tax producing businesses that can't produce sales tax anymore, they're going to move somewhere else. But we are in support of the one option that they did give that does take some of our property, and we'd have to move our sign in the front, we'd have to make some concessions, but to keep that, our business where it's built over the last 40 years is worth that to us. And that's one of the things that we would ask all of our citizens there on Glover Lane, if y'all would form a resolution supporting that option. I believe it was option 1 in their presentation. Option 2 was the actual realignment and moving it down the road. And if y'all would be as bold to show that y'all stand with us, along with Jerry and United Bank on Diamond Street, that, you know, we have to take care of the businesses that have built this community as well. And that is something that they need to take into consideration whenever they're making these plans. And if y'all could kind of push them in that direction and support us, that would be great as well. But DOT, if they're looking at making a pretty road and moving cars, that's great. But if you're putting businesses out of business along that road, then that road's going to be harder to fund the next time they try to make it pretty, and there's not going to be a whole lot of traffic there anyways. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, 1193 Mary Lou Lane, Jeff Helms, and just hearing the discussion, and it is important at this point because DOT, as you indicated, it's not a finalized set of plans on the 6 laning, but now's the time to make the adjustments and the changes and hear from the public. They also have what they call, the DOT has an access management committee, and I've referred folks to that over the years when they couldn't get the benefit of the consultant who's bent on getting the moving traffic and not maybe accommodating the adjacent businesses to the innovative approach that they should. I've recommended folks go to that access management committee and just face the DOT and present their case in a committee. And they set that up years ago to try to address some of these issues. You would like to think that they wouldn't have to get in the car and drive all the way to Chipley to do that. It'd be nice if they could come over and meet with the folks and have a little meeting and kind of work it out. But, you know, I think it's appropriate for the commissioners to try to, DOT's been good to Santa Rosa County and a lot of the projects, but at the same time, you know, we got to accommodate our business owners and the folks to as innovative as possible to try to keep these folks in business, as hard enough as it is. So hopefully they'll find a solution, but that is an option. There's an access management committee where you can present your case, but really that should be the last case. They really should try to work that out with these business owners and these folks that are working hard every day. So hopefully that'll be the case. But I just wanted you to know about that fallback.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, have an additional comment, and then we're going to go to Commissioner Cole to craft a motion.
Okay, Barbara Albrecht, 1528 East Brainerd. I just wanted to applaud everyone for encouraging having these dialogues with DOT before the work is started, because a lot of the problems that we're dealing with Indian Bayou are as a result of these projects going forward without having these conversations and understanding the situation where these roads are being built and how they're being developed. So thank you very much for encouraging that. Maybe we could have public meetings in the future where the communities that will be getting these roads will have an opportunity to come and listen and share some of their concerns. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Vice Chairman Cole, would you like to craft a motion for Thursday?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my motion would be that we respectfully request DOT to revisit the Diamond Street intersection and review the findings of the Baskerville-Donovan report in support of our community. And I'll ask that perhaps the county attorney work with, engineering and public works to put together, word craft the right type of language for Thursday for your signature to go to the district secretary.
Okay, very well. We'll have that letter in front of us on Thursday, and then also the Glover Lane follow-up as well, and move that to Thursday's agenda without objection. Thank you for being here today, and we'll make sure to forward a copy of that letter to you as well for your review.
Do we want that on consent, or you think it needs to be on regular, or?
We'll go regular with that. Items 12, 13, 14, and 15 are all related to different 5Ks or ceremonies or things that have been previously approved in the past, like the Blackwater Pirate tipping fee deal. Unless there is any comments or questions for the board on items 12, 13, 14, and 15, I'm prepared to move all 4 of those items to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Hearing no objection, items 12, 13, 14, and 15 are moved to the Thursday consent agenda. That brings us to item number 16, proposals for District 4 Master Plan. Tony?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe I'd supplied each of you information that we had and it's in your backup. When we previously took action and awarded, the board chose Adkins North America based on the staff recommendation. Matrix reached out to us and questioned the scoring that was done relative to that project. We reviewed that, county attorney and I and the staff, and we would agree that based on the RFP, that they should have received 5 points for the reference category, which would have tied them with Adkins. So we're recommending to the board that Adkins and Matrix be scheduled to come back before this board for limited presentation and an interview, and then final selection for a provider for that work.
Okay, so no action for Thursday, or?
Yes, we would want to take that action, would be to schedule a time for, we would notify Adkins officially of what has occurred. I've talked to Jeff unofficially, and we'd notify them officially, and we would be establishing a time for them to come back, either if you wanted to do that during the regular meeting, the last meeting in September, or you could move it to the October 9th meeting when we're going to do the peer information as well, just whatever the board might choose as far as setting a time for them to present to you.
Okay. Commissioner Parker.
I was just going to see how the board would feel about us holding a special meeting there, maybe the first part of October, since we're already going to be dealing with potentially 3 to 5 presentations on the VAR Pier, and then these 2 presentations, and trying to keep it, like Commissioner Lyncher said, to where we don't drag it out so long that our attention span's gone. If we set a special meeting that day that we could start and have just for presentations with a built-in lunch break, and then maybe hear those, I would be willing to do that. But
Are they tied? Is that basically what we're finding out, is that these 2
Yes.
are tied?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm just curious, because for me as the District 4 representative, this has been something that's been talked about for a long time, and it's been ongoing for a while, that waiting until October to then have a presentation to then ultimately select the company is not something that I would prefer. I want to be fair, but at the end of the day, if we have 2 groups that are tied, is it possible that the board could decide on Thursday, if they wanted to recommend moving forward with one of these entities without going through having an additional presentation? Because I'm prepared to make a recommendation now.
I wish the county attorney were here, but I think that, I assume you could.
I mean,
So you
ultimately,
could.
this board is going to decide anyway. We had the procurement process. We followed the normal process. It was scored by 3 members of the staff, and those scores resulted in a tie score. So now that we have a tie score, we break the tie. So I don't, I've looked at the recommendations from staff, and I've looked at the scoring, and at this point, I would be comfortable with making a recommendation and moving forward. I just want to make sure that legally that's allowed to do so. I saw that Commissioner Lynchard was going to make a comment. I want to be fair, but I also, I don't want to be moving on until, October on this.
And, Mr. Chairman, my suggestion was going to be that we not wait until October to hold these interviews. If we want to, there are only 2 consulting firms that we need to interview. They can be, I mean, it's a fairly limited scope, the
Right.
District 4 master plan. So even our first Monday meeting in September, at the conclusion of that meeting, we could allocate 15 minutes per for presentations.
Okay.
And decide then. That way, I mean, we're pushing it out 2 weeks, 3 weeks from Thursday, but we're not
I
waiting
can
another
support that.
month.
I'd support that, so we'll have it on the first set of meetings for September.
The Monday meeting on September 11th, does that be okay?
That would work for me. Okay.
And set that at the end of the meeting, at the conclusion?
Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Jeff Helms, 1193 Mary Lou Lane. I am Vice President of Atkins, and I do appreciate your comments and the concern. When I get up every morning and I look in the mirror and I shave and I see someone that's flawed, I'm not perfect. and nor do I expect anybody else to be perfect. And your staff's not perfect, and adding things up. And the one thing I tell my kids is if you screw up or if you make a mistake, you try to correct it. and what I would say to you is go ahead and correct it. I'm 32 years of doing this business engineering. It's a tough business at times. And if I was Matrix, and I've been on Matrix's side 3 or 4 times in 32 years, and it wasn't corrected properly to give them an opportunity. And so I would recommend you do the presentation and give them a fair and equitable chance. I don't want to tell you that we're not interested in doing the work, because we're absolutely interested in doing the work. We love Navarre and we want to do the work, but the one thing we don't want to do is be unfair to Matrix, but we're also, if you were to select us today, you'd be unfair to the folks in Navarre. It'd be a flawed process, and we don't want to start off, if we were fortunate to win it, to do that. And so, plus I can look at my kids and tell them, hey, this is an example of the proper way to do things. And so I applaud your decision. We'll be ready to make it. I would make it sooner rather than later if you don't appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I never said who I'd be selecting. All right, then we will move to Thursday. I guess we don't need to move anything to Thursday. We're just scheduling. Do we need to schedule the September 11th?
Yeah, let's
Okay,
go ahead
then
and
put
move
that
it to
Thursday.
schedule that for that time frame. We'll notify the companies.
Okay. No, I move to Thursday's consent agenda to notify the companies of the scheduling of the September 11th meeting presentation. Do so without objection. Hearing no objection, the item is moved. And item number 17, additional stormwater assessment fee. Tony?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, when we had that discussion at Tiger Point, we discussed the various forms of potential revenue. That had been a request that we bring something back at that time. At the conclusion of that item, it was asked that we bring it back when we had a full board here. Commissioner Cole was out, Commissioner Salter was out. And the only reason we have it back is just to determine if you want us to do any further work on this. it would be too late in the process this year to even consider that, so we're not talking about FY18 really. To get this accomplished, we'd be talking about FY19. The next steps for the staff would be to talk to some communities more specifically about our community and how, if they were doing something, or how it might be transferred to our community, good, bad, and indifferent. And so we don't want to pursue additional work if there's not a real interest for us to look at this any further. So really it's a matter of the board directing whether you want us to do any further work on looking at a stormwater fee.
Okay, and I appreciate you providing the examples that you did. It certainly helped me learn a little bit more and answer some questions for me. The information's there in the backup. If any members of the public want to review what they're doing in, I believe it's Polk or Pasco? Pasco County and Alachua County and Bay counties with their 3 different stormwater utility fees, and it has a great frequently asked questions portion in there. It definitely gives me a greater understanding of what's going on, but I did feel it was appropriate to have the board back at full strength before we would direct staff to spend any more time on this. So, Vice Chairman Cole,
Thank you,
would
Mr.
like to
Chairman.
weigh in on this?
Well, just wanted to say I watched the meeting via the internet, and I appreciate Commissioner Blanchard's comments, because I also would not support any type of usage of tax dollars unless there was buy-in from the particular community, whether that be an MSBU or some sort of fee. I compare it to the people on the beach. They don't want to see their beach go away. We as a board bring in all the revenue we can from any entity out there, but at the end of the day, there's an MSBU to help restore that beach. I feel this is much similar. They don't want water in their yards or their home, there has to be buy-in from the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Members of the public like to speak on this matter? Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Ankas for 112 Sheridan Drive. First of all, I'd really like to thank Tony for getting this information. I did print it, I did read it. This is awesome. This is what I've been talking about. I sure hope, and I hope I see some nods. Did every person here read this report? All of the commissioners? If you haven't, please do. I support this 100%. Like I said, I did read it, and I would like to tell you that I would support a equivalent residential unit utility charge to support the county to get funds for the stormwater management. It's the county's first responsibility to protect the public. That's not second. That's first. There shouldn't be any argument or question about where the money's coming from. I would really like everybody to read this and get up to speed. This is a serious issue. This is a really serious issue. Anyway, just on record to say that I definitely support this, and I'm really impressed with this county's ability to put that together, and I would love to see the county just use this, get it implemented. Just another thing that I would like to say, just a couple things. I'm a little confused on the project list that there was some discussion on. We have to prioritize. You know, I don't get over in the south end of the county because I live in the north end of the county. But if there's a difference between somebody's home flooding and paving a road, we need to take care of private property first. And I'm not familiar with the Lost Citizen Committee. I would hope that they are some professional citizens in our area that understand hydrology and some of the basic things that I've been crashing myself on trying to get up to speed on, because I don't know if they don't have those professional qualifications, if they're truly qualified to come up with a list, let alone prioritize them.
And just so you know, that the list was, they did not create the list. They reviewed the list and provided their recommendations and questions on it, and to make sure that the list did match the spirit of and the language of the referendum. And so that list was created from our previous capital expenditure plan that had been created before the vote on the lost ever came about. And so they are a volunteer citizen advisory committee as appointed by the board. And they reviewed the list and ultimately provided a unanimous approval of this one-year list. They'll be reviewing each subsequent list that comes forward every fiscal year to take a look at what's there. So
Okay.
I just wanted to address that, and knowing that you had a question about, if they were the ones that came up with it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I understand what you're saying. I don't care for the process, and I really question it, because there's a difference between a neighborhood, and it doesn't matter if it's north-south. There's a big difference between a neighborhood getting, say, 2 inches of standing water and a neighborhood where the people can't even get in and out of their home. Now, this committee, I would assume that they don't drive around. They haven't talked to Roger or Stephen to find out where the critical areas are. So I'm not sure that I quite understand the thought process of how things are identified as urgent. Like I said, the public health, the protection of your citizens is #1 priority. That's #1. If we don't get the stormwater situation under control, we're not going to have land to build parks. We have to take care of our residential and our commercial first. The rest of it is just prettying up the city. Okay, so I'm still challenging the process of the committee, and I guess can I attend one of their meetings to meet these folks?
Absolutely. They're publicly noticed meetings, and as I said, I came down and listened to the last meeting they have. They're also video archived to where you could watch them. You could go to santarosa.fl.gov, the Santa Rosa County website, and we can have staff give you the meeting dates to where you could look at and review those meetings. But the priorities that are in front of you have been developed over the course of the last year, and I think that some of the priorities definitely reflect a change in trying to be better aligned with the priorities of the community. I mean, I think the one in green that's highlighted there, that Tiburon project, is definitely a significant reaction to the needs of the community. And you're going to have 32 homes there that have had multiple flooding events in 14 and 17, that this will provide relief that area. And there was a suite of projects that was brought forward in working with staff. Not all of them are listed on this lost list, and I think that's important to know as well. There are additional stormwater drainage and infrastructure improvements that the county is moving forward with that might not be identified on this one fiscal year 2018 list. But there are additional projects that are moving forward, whether it be engineering and design for additional project in Pace area, Florida Town, where you start looking at additional activities for the cleaning out of stormwater drainage areas. Then at the last meeting we had, we talked about a suite of improvements in Holly by the Sea area as a result of the study that we received. So this is just a standalone document that gives you what the project list is for the FY18 year, from October 1st through September 30th of the upcoming year, of how we're going to allocate local option sales tax dollars. And what you can see here is, as Dan said, an extraordinary amount of that money is going toward transportation and drainage and public safety, which is what I certainly voted for, and I think a great many people voted for, is public safety and then that infrastructure piece. So if you have questions about the process, or maybe we're not doing a good enough job of communicating the process, then perhaps getting together with Dan or Tony after the meeting and getting those questions answered would be helpful, and we can get you what the subsequent meeting dates would be, and would be great if you'd like to attend one of the local option sales tax meetings.
Okay, that'd be super.
Mr. Chairman, Dan did remind me, just so that you know, October 31st, I guess Halloween will be the next, the committee will meet on the 31st of October. We've already set that.
Costumes or no costumes?
Either way.
No costumes, okay. Sorry. Just trying to add a little levity to the moment.
Okay.
Epic fail, sorry.
That's all right. The other thing, since we're on this topic, and instead of, I know Tony's really busy, and I don't really want to have him come down to the house, throw him in the truck and kidnap him like I did Glenn. But anyway, I think one of the things that we could do is coordinate the efforts between using the LMS group, the communication that, and the information that LMS needs to apply for the grants. They don't get the information from the community on the flooding, stormwater, runoff issues. And I guess, Tony, I'd like to ask you to consider piggybacking a mailing zip code specific through property appraiser, tax appraiser's office to get Sheila the information that she needs for individual grants that may be available, and also the larger municipal grants that may be available to set up newer and more state-of-the-art stormwater facilities, processes, if you will. That's important because we've got that department in place, but we're just not able to utilize their capabilities to the fullest. And I believe that we can get more money for the county if we can get more information from the public.
I think Tony would welcome those suggestions. If you want to bring those forward to him offline of the meeting, that would be great. Is there anything else that you'd like to add on this item before we move forward?
Yes, I also think it's really, really important. I don't remember, I think it was you, Rob, that brought it up, talking about where we're going to get the money for this. And I think Sam mentioned and Lane mentioned the process, because we know that y'all are working on the stormwater issue, but there's always a beginning and an ending to everything. A beginning and an ending. None of us know what that is surrounding the stormwater. So I would like to ask somebody to take some responsibility to think that way. You know what I mean? It's like there's a process. I believe, I don't have all my notes up here, but it was like, engineering, permitting, design. I think it was you, Rob, that mentioned that. There's got to be somebody that can start this process. Because the community can't wait 2, 3, 5, 8 years. It's going to be too late.
Well, I think it's certainly incumbent upon us now that we have additional revenue sources that maybe we didn't have before. I mean, before we pretty much had the local mitigation strategy and we waited for grants that would be somewhere between 6 to 9 years, and that's what we had available to us. You know, there wasn't another revenue source that we had that we could apply toward these multi-million-dollar projects. And so we would have a flood event, the federal government would release some dollars, and that would allow us the ability to go out and try to seek some of this funding. So we had a very structured process there that you could plug into and see where we were. Now I think it's incumbent upon us, now that we have additional revenue sources, to start providing a timeline of how we're looking to solve these problems in various areas around the county and where we are in the process on the Tiburon project, to where you as a citizen or anybody else should be able to go to our website and find out, all right, we've got this project and they've done the engineering and permitting and design for that project, and now we're looking at the construction funding. Or this one has been through the permitting and design and we're currently in construction and it's going to be finished at this point. You're exactly right, where before we really didn't have to worry about that because we only had money coming from one place. So it's pretty easy to track. Now we might have money coming from 3 different sources, and I think staff is working on creating a better resource to where we can find out where we are in the process on these different projects, and we're trying to get there. But I think it's good that you've identified that, and I know that staff is working on doing that.
I would, just to back that up, you know, in case somebody doesn't understand this. For instance, until the stormwater runoff is stopped, folks can't do anything with their property. You know what I mean? So we're like, well, I don't want to replace everything that I lost because it's just going to happen again because they haven't gotten this fixed. So it is a tumbling situation, and what's going to happen is folks, their anger is just going to, you know what I mean, and the losses with the runoff is increasing. The damages are increasing, so this is urgent.
We know you're passionate about it. At this point, I need to keep moving on. We've got a little thing called the solar eclipse that happens once every 100 years, and we have folks that have things to. We've spent a good 20 minutes or more just on this single item at this point. So I feel like we need to move on.
I understand, thank you, but can I borrow your welders? Your welders' glasses?
I think she wants to borrow those.
They got them at Harbor Freight, 2 for $5.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I do think the comments about, you know, the timeline and how we can better make sure that folks can plug into these projects, we have more of them there. I think that's very well served.
And I would encourage folks to use our map story that's on that website for the LOST. It helps tell on a number of those that are listed there.
Absolutely. And if you would email her the next meeting dates or how to get the link to the past meetings where she could review those, that would be great. Okay, so to move the item number 17, there really is no action for Thursday, correct?
I didn't know this would make it loud.
Commissioner Parker?
I apologize. I didn't
You're
know this would make
recognized.
it loud. I wanted to comment. 2 things, I'll try to make it really quick. Dan had said, I think staff is working on possibly looking at some project management software, and I think that'll be phenomenal, not only to the public, but to us. Just like RFQs. My RFQ for Spencerfield we talked about 3 or 4 months ago is actually still in the pipeline. It hasn't even went out. So we would be able to see the process of that. And I commend Dan for him and Tony working on that. As far as, I didn't know we were already moving this item. Looking at the stormwater assessment fee, the backup material was extremely helpful, and so I've sort of evolved in my mindset since we had talked about it at Tiger Point. I personally would be in favor of having staff, and I've talked with them offline, sort of explore it more if there was two other guys that were interested. And throwing that caveat on there, I told them, I totally understand MSBU. There's no perfect answer on it. I mean, am I affected by stormwater? The whole town would have to be underwater before, I'm going to flood where I'm built at. There's a lot of other people that feel that way. I mean, there's a lot of farmland, guys that live on 20, 50 acres in Jay. They don't want to pay for projects to be done, whether it be South County, Pace, Florida Town. That's just a fact. Most people don't want to pay any more than they have to. But with that being said, it's kind of like I heard somebody say recently, just like paving roads, sometimes the taxes alone don't pay for somebody to have a road if there's only 2 or 3 people on that road. The caveat, if there was support of looking at it, that I would want to have in there would be some sort of calculation. I had talked with Tony and Dan about this, that you be given a credit. I don't know exactly, I can't formulate a thorough thought process, but a credit for a space, such as the part I liked about this was the fact that everybody would have to pay, even the low assessment properties that may get exemptions and not even be contributing to property taxes at all, and yet they may be the recipient of some of these stormwater projects. The part that I would want to credit would be, or if there was an interest, I'm sharing with the board members that I would ask staff to look at, is something to do with for one, us putting a cap on it. So if we were talking about, and I know one example that was told to me, hey, if there was a maximum cap of $40, that's not really going to be life-changing to anybody in the community. But also, if we looked at square footage of impervious surface or rooftop, whatever, per acre, or what, a guy that's got 20 acres, I don't think should be paying necessarily the same equivalent for a residential unit as the person that's got the same size house on a 1/4 acre or a 1/3 acre lot. So there may not be any support there, but those would be my thought processes. There's no reason why people, and I'm going to use the J community because it's probably the best one that comes to mind, or Munson area, there's no reason they should be, I would like to see them get credit for not having to pay as much towards stormwater because they're choosing to live in a rural area that obviously they have plenty of ground surface to cover their stormwater, versus some of the neighborhoods that we're allowing to be platted now where we got 3 in an acre. But I may be the only one out there on a limb, but I just wanted to express my comments on that.
I appreciate your comments. You did mention, large parcels of land, and in the backup, it talks about agriculture property, which is a question I had as well, and that as long as they meet the state guidelines for managing stormwater runoff, that they would not be subject to a stormwater assessment. So are you?
Well, I may have read it wrong, but I believe if they have a house on it, they still have to pay the residential unit. I think it was just for purely agricultural land, but I'm saying a guy and I'll use myself, Commissioner Salter is a perfect example just because I know where we live. If you got one house on 5 acres, you're not adding to the problem near as much as the guy that's got a house on the 1/3 acre lot. I mean, and so I would like to see that calculate. I would like to see staff look at calculating that in there if there's interest in staff looking at it at all.
Right. Commissioner Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it wouldn't, I don't think it would be staff coming up with these numbers and calculations. I think we would have to hire a consulting firm to develop the guidelines for an MSBU or stormwater utility and study. I think the backup is good material for us to start digesting, and then at a later date, we can come back and see if we want to proceed down that path, because we would have to require, I don't see any way around us getting an outside consultant to come in, and just like we did with the determining the appropriate level of the MSBU for the beach renourishment. That's not something we can do in-house, and this would be along those same lines. So it's good backup, but this is a big policy discussion that we need to have down the road, and I don't think any of us are prepared to do that today.
Commissioner Salter.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Commissioner Lynchard. I don't have a strong recommendation yet, But I do know it'd be hard for me to go up to Jay in Munson or up in the north end of the county and tell them that we're going to impose some type of stormwater fee on them when in their minds, they're not impacting the stormwater issues in Pace or Holly or Navarre. So we're going to have to be real careful about how we develop this to make sure it's fair to those who live in the county and those who are impacting those drainage areas. So I agree with Commissioner Lynch. We've got to be real careful.
Okay, well, as has been said, it is a big policy discussion. The backup, as Commissioner Parker said, does give us additional information to look at and continue to develop it. And heck, we're just now learning how to and beginning to implement a local option sales tax strategy and fuel tax. You know, I mean, so we're just now trying to wrap our heads around that. So I think one thing that is absolutely undeniable is that there has been a tremendous effort over the course of the last, certainly recent history, 6 to 9 months, on stormwater infrastructure improvements and transportation and drainage improvements, and the dollars show that. The allocations show that. And so this may ultimately be something that we have to revisit. This may ultimately be something that we have to consider, but at this point, it doesn't look like it's ready to move forward just yet. So no action for Thursday on that item. That brings us to item number 18, which I will be here for a portion of it. I have a anniversary, that 9th anniversary, that is going to require me to leave here in the next few minutes and pass the gavel to Vice Chairman Cole. So ahead of this item, I am going to pass the gavel to Vice Chairman Cole, and I will catch you all on Thursday.
Mr. Chairman, does that mean that Commissioner Williamson only has an anniversary once every 99 years?
I'd just like to congratulate Commissioner Williamson on this anniversary. It's something that is dear to him, and I think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it is. I know that it may seem like I'm trying to cut out for the eclipse, but actually, that is not the reason for it.
Just turn your headlights on when it gets dark.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, item number 18 is the discussion of San Juan Street. Mr. Gamillion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the board had asked that we kind of bring that back for a little bit more discussion this week. I think really it indicated maybe a little better understanding of the property along that street. Mr. Andrews, as you know, was not here today to discuss. I think as far as in the backup, we did note the value of those parcels along that street frontage as noted in the property appraiser's office, which I would remind you that certainly is not a sale price that an independent appraiser might put on that. Also, I've noted in the backup the cost of road and bridge estimate for paving that road utilizing our standard practice. It is that road is on the restore list that will be coming up soon for further discussion. A list of dirt roads for paving that's on that restore application. Now that is certainly there's not a time frame for exact action relative to that list in terms of when it would be approved or acted upon, and the cost would be somewhat a different question mark relative to what monitoring requirements might satisfy the restore application as well. One other thing, just as a side note, Mr. Furman did meet with members of the Water Management District, I believe, last week. After there had been an afternoon rain, he went down and met with them on San Juan, and they went further down to the retention area and wetlands area off of Avalon Boulevard below the I-10 project. I think their eyes were open quite a bit, the Northwest Florida Water Management District, when they observed the the ditch on San Juan and the clarity of the water there, and then observed the clarity of the water down off of Avalon there. I think they really had an eye-opening experience there. So that's where we are, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other comments? Commissioner Parker?
I'd just say, since I had the opportunity to meet with the Northwest Florida management as well as our administrator and Mr. Furman, recently since then, and realizing even through their own testimony that this problem really became a problem once the DOT construction began, I have reached out again. I think it's terrific. I almost wish we would have held this to Thursday, but I wasn't aware at the time. I made the request down at Tiger Point that our district state representative would be here Thursday, but I have directed folks to notify him. I have sent him the report that you just referred to for Mr. Furman. I actually got an email back over the weekend, saying thanks, and I think now he's probably got some new insight to the project. Just kind of my comments at the time, because I want us to work towards solving our problem, but I think we've got to, and I'll address it with him when he's here Thursday. If we take care of 25% of the problem, and I'm just using that as an example, 75% of the problem is still going to be there until we can get some leverage, and hopefully he can do that, because he's I'm assuming to DOT what we are to Road and Bridge here, as far as the legislative body. So,
All right. Well, I mean, there's no homes on this street that I'm aware of. I just don't see us spending county dollars unless we can get state input to make any improvements to these roads. Any other comments from commissioners? We got one public comment. Barbara?
One thing I'd just say as she comes up, and as he said, Roy is not here, and I surely don't want to speak for him, but I know one option that we had possibly discussed that, again, is an option, there's going to be some good and bad with it, is if we didn't pave it, if we capped it per se with sand and grassed it, I think he said there would be a partial diminished value to some of these property owners. There's some options, but one thing he did say that I will convey is that before we would take action of anything that would possibly diminish value, so basically any option rather than paving it, he thinks it would be, if I remember right, prudent for us to do a mail-out notification to the affected property owners. So they're going to have, hopefully a chance for input. Really, the only option that we wouldn't need to do that for was if we paved the road.
Okay. All right.
But anyway, I just wanted to convey that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Barbara Albrecht, 1528 East Brainerd. Thank you for looking into this. Thank you, County Administrator Gamillion. One question that really pops out is how many of the property owners on San Juan are current with their property taxes? Are there any that have gone delinquent over time?
I don't have any idea.
Okay, because as I pointed out in the presentation 2 weeks ago, that system is tidally influenced. And that's something that was not evident to the county or to DOT until we started paving the interstate, and that action was taken to clear the right-of-way along the interstate, which then opened the avenue for the area on the north side of the interstate to drain with our rain events. I mean, it's not like a blame game. It's a multiple set of factors that have all kind of compounded.
Well, I really think until they get the interstate finished, plus with the addition of all the rain we've had this year, and we've seen it when they were doing I-110. They, all the silt and the red clay that escaped into the creek there.
Carpenter Creek.
Carpenter Creek. So right now we have, I think, a similar instance. We got an absorbent amount of rain in a very short period of time. We've got construction going on. So really, you know, and like you say, it's not a blame game. It just happened. The good Lord blessed us with way more rain than we needed all at one time, but we'll have to deal with it. So until I think this project's finished and we can get everything settled out again, I really don't see a resolve to it. You know,
Well-
we can continue with silt fencing and protective measures, but until, you know, they're done and cut the ribbon on this thing, I really think we're kind of in a standstill position.
The difference between Carpenter Creek, which I'll be presenting on tomorrow night for our community in Escambia County, and Indian Bayou, is that Carpenter Creek is an inland system that starts off at a elevation of 135 feet and then drains down. Indian Bayou and the north end of the interstate between Avalon Boulevard to the west is a tidal wetland system.
Yeah.
So they completely apples and oranges. They can't be compared.
Well, what I'm comparing is
It's the amount of
is the amount of-
construction,
Yeah, the construction, yeah.
but also the amount of red clay and the grading and the concept of digging ditches to lower the water table and to have drainage. I mean, that's what we basically did with the Everglades. And fast forward, here we are still trying to fix those issues. I mean, we know more today than we have ever about how our environment works, how these ecosystem services and functions interact. And I'm just bringing it to your attention. I applaud the county for doing their effort. I applaud the efforts that we're taking. Ideally, this property, according to the Santa Rosa County Land Development Code, is the low-lying area. It's in harm's way. If you put in a road, you'll encourage development. If you encourage development in a low-lying area, you're going to have an impact later on to Indian Bayou. Indian Bayou right now is looked at because it has high mercury levels, and it's a sedimentation issue. And I've shined a light on it for the county commissioners, but also the water management has a responsibility, as does the DEP, as does the state, to not allow these systems, which have been lost over time, to continue being lost. So, I mean, we just went through the process of trying to get an estuary program, RFP, for our area so that we can improve our water quality. Like I said a couple weeks ago, this is a low-hanging fruit. We can do better. So perhaps look at the elevation there, recognize that it's very low. Maybe that area needs to be condemned. I mean, we surely didn't know then what we know now, but now that we know what we know, perhaps that property should have never been on the tax base, and the property owners there can be purchased out. There are mitigation banks that are interested in that property. DOT is going to be making their way to the east. They're going to have to do mitigation all along the way. Why not let them utilize this? Water management has a mitigation bank. They have the way to handle this. You have GCPEP that could easily take that over. There's so many options, and I'm willing to be creative and help you in this, but you know, keeping that on the books is not a good idea. And as I pointed out a couple weeks ago, there were homeowners that were actually trying to give the property back, and as Mr. Gomillion pointed out, it's a swampland. We don't want it.
Well, if there's mitigation banks that are interested in this, would they not approach the property owners and start buying up these properties? How?
Well, it has to go through the county somewhat.
Okay.
And I understand that the county doesn't want to have to deal with all these individual homeowners, but in reality, if you look at the low water table, people that are going to want to build there, are you going to permit a septic tank in a low-lying wetland area that's tidally influenced, given what we know now? No.
Well,
Why is this even a point of discussion? I mean, you're dealing with flooding, you're dealing with.
There's thousands of lots out here that would have to be dealt with, not just the ones along this road. that are
I understand. I've looked at this. I've been studying it for over a year, and I've
Well, it's
collected data.
nothing we're going to be able to figure out today. It's a
No,
bigger
no.
thing
I-
we could
and I
choose,
certainly
so-
understand that.
so
I'm here
I'd
to-
like to go ahead and move on now with this. I don't see any action for Thursday, but we'll certainly, you know me for a long time. We've been on
Right.
BARC together, so maybe it's something we need to bring up at BARC and see if we can get these mitigation banks involved. So let's discuss that more further at maybe one of the BARC meetings.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
All right, our next item, there won't be any action on number 18 for Thursday, so number 19 is reciprocant application and risk management. Discussion and approval of subreciprocant application and risk management document for federal funding. Mr. Gomillion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
I'm closing that item out right now. We're kind of on a time schedule for that, but if you got something new to add to it pretty quickly?
My name is Judy Walker. I live at 2609 San Clemente on Indian Bayou. And I wanted to acknowledge that our appreciation that finally, after over a year of trying to have a discussion of what was happening with all the red clay, that there does seem to be some definition of a problem existing, and so our neighborhood is appreciative of that. And I also wanted to reinforce the continued discussion because there needs to be a discussion about remediation of the bayou and some remediation for dealing with how much red clay has gone into the bayou and into the bay.
Right.
And we are
if you're-
continually reinforced to, as the public, to find out about things and to participate. And I just wanted to say that our neighborhood intends to participate in this.
Okay.
And we will need to rely on the county because it now seems to be that state departments are going to be called into play on this, and we definitely need the county support.
And what I was suggesting, and Barbara may back me up on this, in the two-county area, we've got the Bay Area Resource Council that deals a lot with this. It's dealt with TMDLs for years, helped Pensacola lessen that, a bunch of different projects, and it perhaps would be a better place to start with on this larger project at the Bay Area Resource Council more so than, certainly bring it to our attention helps, but to get this project underway, I think Bay Area Resource Council would be a better place to start it with.
I appreciate the information, and we'll follow up with it. One thing that we have learned is that this is complicated.
Sure.
It's not easy to find out who to talk to. It's not easy to find out what meeting to attend. It's not easy to finally make it to a meeting and be told, oh, this was decided years ago, you're too late.
Yeah, okay.
And so when we come to participate in this and to learn things, then we want to make it known that we are here.
Absolutely.
And that we
I
are
didn't mean
trying
not
to
to
find
catch
out
you on that.
things.
We just, all right?
So, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. All right.
yes, Mr. Chairman, on item number 19, Erica is here. We've got several items. Some of those will just be real quick. Some she'll need to just describe to you a little bit if you have questions. But that first one is the risk assessment is part of the requirement for the federal funding when we deal with these subrecipients. So we want to make you aware of that process.
Yes, as Tony mentioned, I'll go quick. I'll skip over the less important slides. The main point of the presentation today is to inform you that Santa Rosa County is going to be entering into a new business, if you will, of granting subrecipient agreements. This is not something that we've done before in the past. And because of that, the federal government requires us to implement new policies and procedures related to this process. You should also be aware, excuse me, that there are risks associated with this process. And that leads us to approval of the subrecipient risk assessment, which is in your backup documentation today. So next slide, please. This chart here, for clarification, shows how the funds flow from the federal agency or the grantor, which in terms of Pot 1 funding will be Treasury Department, to Santa Rosa County. In all cases, we will be the grantee. And that's significant because that means that we will be responsible for all of the Pot 1 direct component funds. Thank you, Tony. Once we receive a grant agreement from Treasury Department, we will choose at that point to enter into a subrecipient agreement with a pass-through entity, or we will directly administer the project ourselves. I've also included up here contracting, because I want to make it clear to everyone that a subrecipient agreement is not the same thing as a contract. There are two different processes and sets of regulations that apply to each process. And furthermore, a subrecipient has the option to further contract out services with a grant agreement. And so you have this in your backup, so I'll skip through it, but these charts from the next two slides just highlight the differences between a contractor and a subrecipient. And just for simplicity's sake, an example of a subrecipient would be the City of Milton or the City of Gulf Breeze. And an example of a contractor would be a construction company or an engineering firm. This slide is really important, and so I will read this to you. The terms and conditions of federal awards flow down to subawards and subrecipients. Subrecipient must have the ability to effectively manage a federal award. This is very important, and I think this is something that at the start of this Restore Pot 1 process, not a lot of people understood. This is important because Santa Rosa County will be held accountable for acts of noncompliance on the part of the subrecipient. We are 100% and completely responsible for what the subrecipient does with that money. Next slide. Examples of noncompliance might not be as overt as spending the money inappropriately. An example of noncompliance could be a lack of written policies and procedures, and the federal government outlines exactly which policies and procedures need to be documented. Next slide. It's also important for subrecipients or entities wishing to become subrecipients to understand that this money, this Restore money, is not a gift. It's a federal award with strings attached, and they must be a responsible steward of federal funds. Without getting too technical, here are a couple of main points. According to the Uniform Guidance for Federal Awards, 2 CFR 200, and that governs all federal awards, not just Restore funding, all subrecipients must maintain financial management systems that are consistent with Section 302. All subrecipients must maintain internal controls and written procedures that are consistent with Section 303. And all subrecipients must permit the pass-through entity, which is Santa Rosa County, and auditors to have access to their financial records and statements. This is important because you'll see how it could potentially be difficult for some smaller organizations to accept a federal award and to meet these requirements. And of course, there are also requirements for pass-through entities. These are the requirements that Santa Rosa County will be held to. And as you can see here, Santa Rosa County is required by federal law to evaluate each subrecipient's risk of noncompliance. And the next couple of slides I won't read to you, but there are also guidelines on subrecipient monitoring. And I just want to be clear that it's not going to be the case that we'll issue a subaward to a subrecipient and then step away and let them do whatever they want. There are very specific monitoring requirements that Santa Rosa County will have to undertake with each subrecipient agreement.
Let me ask you this before you go. This sounds like a lot of, so the more subrecipients we have out there, the more work's going to be put on your department?
That is correct.
Do you have kind of a rationale for, okay, if we put out 5 of these, it's going to take X number of hours to monitor?
I don't have a number of hours, but my last slide in the presentation, it does, right now, Grants Department manages 27 open grant agreements. Okay. What you have to keep in mind with subrecipient agreements is that there are actually 2 grant agreements to manage. There's the grant agreement between Santa Rosa County and the federal government, and then there's the grant agreement between the subrecipient and the county. Okay. So if all of the subrecipients, if all of the potential subrecipients out of our 14 MYIP projects were to request and be eligible for subrecipient agreements, that would near double the amount of agreements that Grants Department will be responsible for managing. Excuse me, I'm not sure why I'm losing my voice today. I apologize.
And do they allow for additional, is somewhere in the grant agreement allow for funding for monitoring, or is that going to come out of our pocket?
Yes, we are allowed to essentially recoup 3% of the project cost for each of our 14 projects for administrative costs.
Yeah, okay, thank you, appreciate it.
And that's irregardless of whether there's a subrecipient agreement or not. We are actually, pending board approval, we are actually planning to do that with all projects, whether they're directly administered or whether there's a subrecipient agreement. We're allowed 3% per Treasury Standard Terms and Conditions. And so because of these requirements and the requirement that we must conduct a risk assessment of all potential subrecipients, we've come up with the subrecipient application and risk assessment that's contained within your backup and that we're asking for approval for today. For applicants that are not able to meet the requirements of the subrecipient to enter into a subrecipient agreement, the county will directly administer their project. And this slide is, these are the 14 projects that are in our MYIP in the priority order that was approved by the board in April. And this is twofold. This is going to provide you with a status update as far as how we're working through these applications. And you can see, and as you're aware, the Discovery Center is our first individual project application. Treasury Department has conducted a courtesy review, and the application is ready to submit to Treasury. Our dirt road paving project, we have completed our best available science on that, and the application is ready to submit for courtesy review by Treasury Department. And you can see that the third project on our priority list is the oyster habitat restoration project, and that will be the first project where we, actually the Nature Conservancy did inform me today that they will request a subrecipient agreement related to that project. And so that is why we're here today, to request approval of the risk assessment. I have already emailed that out to all of the applicants or potential subrecipients last week, so they're aware of what is potentially coming their way. So now I'll set up meetings with the organizations that have questions or are not quite, don't quite have a good understanding of the process, and we'll start accepting those applications from the potential subrecipients that you see listed there. And we've sort of already discussed this last slide, which just kind of discusses the allocation of Grants Department resources, that there is most certainly an increased workload associated with subrecipient agreements, both in terms of monitoring these subrecipients, providing training for the subrecipients, providing courses of action in cases of noncompliance with the subrecipients, but also just the actual administrative tasks associated with managing a grant agreement in terms of reporting and closeout, that type of a thing. And thank you for letting me go into detail on that. I think it's not too exciting, but it's important for you to understand the processes and the logic behind it.
So if there's any comments from board members, let's move this to Thursday for final approval. Consent agenda, yeah. I think it's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And it's good to know that we'll at least be able to, and Mr. Gamillion, I'd leave it up to your option as far as, I would think some of this extra help would probably be like through a agency.
Yes, we'll continue to monitor the workload and how all this plays out. If necessary, we'll look at temporary help before adding any permanent staff.
Okay, thank you. All right, hearing no objections, we'll move that to Thursday for final vote. Item number 20 is Restore Pot 1 Discovery Center Phase 1 application submittal, and we briefly touched on that during this conversation on item 19. Any comments or questions on that? It's going to be good to see some of this project get underway. Seeing no comments or questions from commissioners, no comments from the public, we'll move that to Thursday's consent agenda. Without objection, hearing none, it passes. Item 21, 22, 23, and 24 are all CDBG policy resolutions. Mr. Gomillion, can you kind of touch on those for
Yes,
us?
these again are requirements of Treasury. We'd be glad to answer any questions. These are somewhat ministerial in that we need to update policies and make sure that we're aligned with what the CDBG grants are requiring for us to have in place in terms of policies, and that's what you have in front of you, are several of those, that ADA, this one that refers to nonviolent civil rights demonstrations, one that refers to the citizen participation plan, and so all of these are really housekeeping type of items we have to have in place, and as part of our updated policies to continue to be available, CDBG funding to be available to us.
All right. We all know how far that goes, so if there's any comments, questions, seeing none from the public, I'll move that to Thursday without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 25 is Coastal Partnership Initiative Program Partnership Project. Discussion of DEP Agreement Number CM814, which approves $10,000 in the Coastal Partnership Initiative Program funding for the creation of a maritime heritage trail to the Baghdad Waterfronts Partnership Incorporated with Santa Rosa County. This is a continuing effort to continue our Baghdad Mill Site Park and connections to it. Do we have any comments from board members? Do we have any comments from the public on this? I think this is a great addition to our community, and we've had a lot of citizen support and a lot of citizen effort from this. So seeing none, I'll be happy to see that move to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Our engineers report, item number 1 is Navarre Beach Wellhouse number 2, electrical upgrade contract modification number 2. And it's a discussion of contract modification for Navarre Beach Wellhouse number 2, electrical upgrades. No additional cost, but adding 35 days to the contract time. Any comments or questions about that? Move it, seeing none, we'll move it to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Item 2 is recovery and monitoring well maintenance and repair service requests for proposals. We're going to do RFP, discussion of advertising RFP for recovery and monitoring well maintenance and repair services to support landfill operations. This is ongoing landfill operations, of course, comes out of the capital funds there, so, or enterprise funds, excuse me. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll pass that to the consent agenda on Thursday. Item 3 is Dewberry Pebble Rish Fall 2017 Compliance and Assessment Water Quality Sampling Event, and a discussion of task order from Dewberry Pebble Rish to perform the Fall 2017 Semi-Annual Compliance and Assessment Water Sampling Event in the amount of $23,256. Roger, can you enlighten us a little more on that?
Well, certainly. We have a contract to do 2 annual sampling, semi-annual sampling events. They've already performed their 2. We're asking to extend 1 more semi-annual event with Dewberry Pebble Rish. Our companion item number 4 will actually be an RFP to go out for these very services. In addition to, we're adding to our RFQ, I should say, is the reporting requirement. We anticipate over the course of the next year losing staff members who are doing this reporting, and we want to incorporate it into our consultants' fees. So we want to do 1 more sampling event under this contract extension and then go out for a new consulting service.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Any questions from the board? Seeing none, we'll move that to Thursday without objection. And that'll be on the consent agenda, Mr. Gamine? Okay. And then Roger also explained item number 4 was the landfill water quality support service request for proposals. So any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Just real quick, you said we currently have staff that's doing,
We have a a professional geologist on staff, and he's slated to retire. And so we're looking at alternatives between replacing him or going to a consultant. And so
Okay,
with
so that's what the RFQ's for, determine which
the
way would be.
RFQ is to replace, Dewberry Preble Rich's work effort, but we've included in the RFQ a provision to do the reporting so that we'll have options when he retires.
Okay, I didn't know it was a certified geologist. I was just wondering, could we get somebody in the pipeline to take his spot? But I could see where that's a pretty specialized position.
It's pretty tough with the current
Thanks.
staffing level, but it's something we are looking at within the enterprise account.
Yeah, I'm pushing for you positions and pay raises over here. Work with me.
And we do thank you.
All right, we'll move item number 4 to Thursday without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Public Service Committee, item number 1 is EMS County Grant Application, and it's a discussion of approval to submit a resolution for an annual EMS grant application to the Florida Department of Health for funding in the amount of $24,986 and authorize documentation signature. Move that to Thursday without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 2 is a CERT agreement, fiscal year 2017 amendment. Discussion to accept a modification to the Citizens Core Program, or CERT, grant that reflects an increase in the amount of funding and reinstates and extends the terms and the ending date. Move that to Thursday without objection. Seeing
Both of
none.
those to consent, Mr. Chairman.
Consent, yes, sir. Third one also would be consent agenda hazard analysis agreement for 2018. Is discussion to accept the award of the hazard analysis fiscal year 2017 grant agreement in the amount of $8,674 and authorized signatures. Move that to Thursday without objection. Seeing none, it passes to the consent agenda on Thursday. Item 4, Citizen Core Program Grant Agreement for 2018. And this is a discussion to accept the Citizen Core Program Grant Agreement Award for 2018 in the amount of $14,000 that's administered by Volunteer Florida. Looking for any objections, seeing none, it passes to the consent agenda on Thursday. Ordinance 2003-29, amendment. Discussion of a request from Thomas Holmes to delete the condition for rezoning 2003-R-046, attachment D of ordinance 2003-29. Open that to discussion from the board. Commissioner Salter.
Mr. Chairman, the decision today is whether we're going to delete or not delete or have a public hearing.
Now, the decision today is to schedule a public, approval to schedule a public hearing has nothing to do with the action the board would take. Well, it has something to do with it, but it is not approving this request.
Right.
Thank you, Commissioner Salter, for that clarification. Noting the clarification, I'll ask for any other comments. Seeing none, we'll pass it to Thursday to the regular agenda. Or should it be on consent?
Consent's fine.
Consent, okay. All right, thank you, we'll correct that. Item 6, ordinance 2017-13 amendment, discussion to advertise and schedule a public hearing for the item for ordinance 2017-13 due to a scrivener's error. So we're just correcting some paperwork there and some errors. So I'll move that to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Item number, that closes out Public Service Committee, Public Works Committee. Commissioner Salter, I see you have no agenda items today, sir. So.
I have no agenda items, Mr. Chairman, but we've talked a lot lately about drainage and transportation projects. I just want Stephen to go back and tell all of his employees how much the board appreciates all their hard work, and they're doing a great job. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, I'll open it now to Budget and Financial Committee report. Commissioner Parker.
Thank you. Item number 1 is purchase a pickup trucks for compliance and inspections. Discussion of purchasing 3 pickup trucks from the lowest bidder, meeting specifications. Landry McClarty Dodge, in the amount of $58,329. There's backup material that's previously provided. I would recommend moving this to Thursday if there's no further comment or objection.
Hearing none, it's moved.
Item number 2 is budget amendment number 2017-175, discussion of budget amendment 2017-175 in the amount of $809,011 to properly recognize and allocate the budget for the Motorola credit in the debt service fund. I would recommend moving that to Thursday's consent agenda as well as the previous item to consent agenda if there's no objection or further comment.
Seeing none, it passes.
Item number 3, discussion of budget amendment 2017-176 in the amount of $96,602 to true up the debt service fund based on an audit review performed by Finance Department. I would recommend moving that to consent agenda for Thursday if there's no objection.
Seeing none, it passes.
And item number 4 is discussion of approval of check register. I would also recommend moving that to consent agenda if there's no objection, and that concludes the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and I see no objection to item number 4, so it'll pass till Thursday. This time I'll open the floor to public forum.
Good morning. Kyle Hawley, and so I thank you for just a couple of compliments. I would say this weekend also kudos to Stephen Furman. I saw maintenance on a road I've never seen in my entire life. I'm about 50 years old. It was outstanding. I've never seen it before. It was just great. I couldn't catch the guy to tell him I appreciated it. Not far from where I am on the weekends. More specifically, I want you guys as commissioners to recognize something that's going to happen as a result of the sub-recipient agreement that Erica spoke to. In my role in grants and major gifts at United Way, when we look at organizations of all sizes and scales, the nonprofits in the area, many of them are in need of capacity building activities, and they can't afford them. So as we move through this kind of funding for those kind of projects, and with your leadership through the grants department on those sub-recipient agreements, there will be an added benefit in the future from a capacity building perspective. I don't want to confuse you, but if you get any criticism from that, I just want to reassure you that the work that they're doing is outstanding and will have long-lasting impact in terms of developing the written policies that are required, when you manage federal funds. It's a nuance, but it's actually something that's been on my list of things to do for 20 years. So I'm really glad to see that there's going to be this added capacity building benefit from the required work that you all are doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, then we are adjourned.